The smell of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen as I wiped sweat from my brow, orchestrating the chaos of a Friday night dinner service. Pots clanged, flames roared, and servers darted in and out with steaming plates of my signature dishes. This was my element, the heart of Lorenzo's, the Italian restaurant I'd built from a rundown diner into the talk of the neighborhood. "Jacqueline!" My mother-in-law Margaret's shrill voice cut through the kitchen's symphony. "The marinara is too spicy again. I just had table 6 complain." I bit my tongue, maintaining my focus on plating the seafood risotto. "The recipe hasn't changed in 5 years, Margaret. It's the same sauce that won us the city's Best Italian award last month." "Well, maybe we should go back to my recipe," she huffed, hovering over my shoulder. "The old customers preferred it." The old customers, right. All 12 of them who used to come to the failing restaurant before I convinced Terry to let me revamp the menu. Before I spent countless nights perfecting recipes and building relationships with local suppliers. Before I transformed this place into something special. "Order up," I called out, ignoring her commentary. "Table 8, 2 risottos, 1 chicken marsala." "You're behind on table 12. Terry appeared through the kitchen doors, his presence adding to the tension. My husband of 15 years looked more like a businessman these days than the charming chef I'd fallen in love with in culinary school. And Mother's right about the marinara. I closed my eyes for a moment, counting to 3. "I've got it under control, Terry. Why don't you handle the front of house?" "Someone has to," he muttered, exchanging knowing looks with his mother. The night continued its familiar dance, me cooking, them criticizing. By closing time, my feet ached and my chef's coat was stained with the day's efforts, but satisfaction warmed my chest as I counted the night's receipts. Another record-breaking Friday. "We need to talk about the books," Terry said, appearing in the office doorway. His mother lingered behind him like a shadow. "The numbers are great," I smiled, holding up the stack of receipts. "We're up 20% from last month." "That's not what I mean," Terry sighed, loosening his tie. "Mother and I have been discussing the future of Lorenzo's." Margaret stepped forward, her perfectly manicured hands clasped together. "The restaurant business is changing, dear. We need to think bigger." "Bigger?" I set down the receipts. "We're doing better than ever. The food critic from the Herald is coming next week and—" "This isn't about your cooking," Terry interrupted. "It's about business decisions, real business decisions." The way he emphasized real made my stomach clench. "I handle the business decisions too, Terry. Or did you forget who negotiated our produce contracts? Who developed our catering program?" "That's all kitchen stuff," Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "We're talking about the big picture." "I think I'll stay late and finish the inventory," I said, turning back to my paperwork. I couldn't handle another lecture about my place in the restaurant. They left, but their words lingered like smoke in the air. I worked until nearly midnight, finding comfort in the routine of counting and organizing. As I prepared to leave, voices drifted from the dining room. Terry and Margaret were still here? I moved closer to the partially open door, their hushed conversation becoming clearer. "The buyers want to close quickly," Terry was saying. "They're offering more than we expected." My heart stopped. "Good," Margaret replied. "The sooner we get rid of this place, the better. We can use the money to open that sports bar franchise you've been eyeing." "What about Jacqueline?" "Oh, Terry." Margaret's laugh was soft but cruel. "She's a good cook, I'll give her that. But her place is in the kitchen, not in business meetings. She'll understand eventually." I pressed my hand against my mouth, stifling a gasp. The room spun as pieces clicked into place. The mysterious meetings, the whispered phone calls, Terry's sudden interest in the financial paperwork. They were selling my restaurant, my dream, my life's work, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me. I slid down the wall, my legs unable to hold me up anymore. The cold tile against my back was the only thing that felt real. Through the crack in the door, I could see them toasting with the expensive wine I'd selected for our anniversary celebration next week. "To new beginnings," Terry said, clinking his glass against his mother's. I looked down at my hands, calloused and scarred from years of cooking, building, creating. These hands had turned a failing diner into a neighborhood gem. These hands had created the dishes that put us on the map. These hands, I realized as they curled into fists, weren't done fighting yet. Not by a long shot. I spent the weekend in a daze, mechanically going through the motions of prep work and service while my mind raced with possibilities. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was an explanation that made sense of this betrayal. Earth to Jackie. Annika waved her hand in front of my face. My best friend and head server looked concerned. You've been staring at that sauce for 10 minutes. What's going on? Before I could answer, Terry burst through the kitchen doors, practically glowing. Everyone gather round, big announcement. The kitchen staff dropped what they were doing, forming a circle. Margaret appeared at Terry's side, beaming like she'd just won the lottery. My stomach churned. We've got amazing news, Terry announced. Lorenzo's has been acquired by the Summit Restaurant Group. They're going to transform this place into something really special. The room erupted in confused murmurs. I gripped the edge of the prep table, knuckles white. What about our jobs? Carlos, my sous chef of 3 years, asked. Summit will evaluate everyone's positions during the transition, Margaret explained smoothly. But don't worry. Good kitchen help is always needed. Kitchen help. The words hit me like a physical blow. When did this happen? I found my voice, surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside me. When were you planning to discuss this with me, Terry? The room fell silent. Terry's smile faltered slightly. Jackie, honey, let's talk about this in private. No, I stepped forward. Let's talk about it right here. When were you planning to tell your wife, the executive chef who built this restaurant's reputation, that you were selling it? Now, Jacqueline, Margaret cut in, don't make a scene. This is a business decision. A business decision? I laughed, the sound harsh and foreign. I own 30% of this restaurant. You can't sell without my signature. Terry's expression darkened. Actually, we can. Remember that paperwork you signed last month? The insurance documents? The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Those papers. I'd been in the middle of dinner service, and Terry had insisted they needed signing right away. You tricked me? My voice cracked. We did what was necessary, Margaret said firmly. You're an excellent chef, dear, but the business side of things, well, it's better left to those who understand it. Annika stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. Are you kidding me? Jackie's the reason this place is successful. That's enough, Terry snapped. The deal is done. Summit takes over next month. Anyone who wants to stay on can interview with the new management. I looked around at my staff, my family, seeing the shock and confusion on their faces. Carlos, who'd been with me since we served our first plate. Maria, whose dessert recipes had earned us write-ups in food magazines. All of them betrayed along with me. Jackie, Terry reached for my arm, but I jerked away. Be reasonable. You can keep cooking. That's what you love, right? What I loved, I said quietly, was building something of my own, something real. I untied my apron, letting it fall to the floor. But I guess that was never really mine, was it? I walked out of the kitchen, past the dining room where I'd served countless meals, past the bar where I'd celebrated our successes, and straight to my car. Annika followed, calling my name, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I'd fall apart. At home, I methodically packed a bag while Terry blew up my phone with messages. Each one made me angrier than the last. You're being dramatic. Think about this rationally. Mother and I know what's best. Your place is in the kitchen, not the boardroom. A knock at the door made me jump. I opened it to find Annika, holding a bottle of wine and wearing her "let's plot revenge" face. I brought reinforcements, she said, pushing past me into the house. Also, I quit. Told Terry exactly where he could stick his transition period. Despite everything, I laughed. You didn't. Oh, I did. She pulled out 2 glasses. Now we're going to drink this wine, and then we're going to figure out how to make those backstabbing snakes regret the day they underestimated you. I sank onto the couch beside her, finally letting the tears fall. They're probably right. What do I know about business? I'm just the help. Bull! Annika poured the wine with force. Who negotiated our liquor licenses? Who created our inventory system? Who turned a failing diner into the hottest reservation in town? She handed me a glass. You're not just a chef, Jackie. You're a businesswoman who happens to be brilliant in the kitchen, and I think it's time we showed them exactly what they're losing. I took a sip of wine, my mind already spinning with possibilities. Terry and Margaret thought they'd won, thought they'd put me in my place. But they'd forgotten something crucial about chefs. We know exactly how to turn up the heat. You're right, I said, a plan beginning to form. And I think I know just the person to help us serve up some karma. Rick! I called out, waving to the familiar figure at the corner table of the busy cafe. He stood up, his crisp suit and confident smile exactly as I remembered from our previous business dealings. Jackie, he grasped my hand warmly. When you called, I could hardly believe it. You never did take me up on that investment offer. Because I was building something with my husband, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Or so I thought. Rick's expression turned serious as I laid out everything that had happened. He'd been trying to invest in Lorenzo's for years, recognizing its potential early on. I'd always declined, loyal to the family business idea. Let me get this straight, he leaned forward. They sold to Summit without telling you? Those corporate vultures who turn every restaurant into a cookie-cutter franchise? I nodded, stirring my coffee. They tricked me into signing away my rights. The deal closes in 3 weeks. Interesting timing, Rick mused, pulling out his tablet. Summit's stock has been struggling. They need this acquisition to look good to their shareholders. He smiled, a predatory gleam in his eye. Which means they can't afford any complications. What kind of complications? Well, he swiped through some documents. Summit's whole pitch is about acquiring successful, well-running establishments. What happens if Lorenzo suddenly starts struggling right before the sale closes? Annika, who'd been quietly listening, perked up. You mean like if their executive chef and half the staff suddenly quit? Exactly, Rick nodded. And if certain health code violations were anonymously reported, if their stellar reviews suddenly turned mediocre, if their books showed some concerning patterns. I won't do anything illegal, I said firmly. Nothing illegal, Rick assured me, just strategic. Summit has a clause in their contract. They can back out if the restaurant's performance drops below certain metrics before closing. Your husband and mother-in-law are counting on that final payment. What happens if it falls through? My phone buzzed. Another text from Terry. Mother and I are willing to forgive your outburst. Come back to work and we can discuss your role in the new structure. My blood boiled. Tell me more about these metrics. Over the next hour, Rick outlined a plan that was both simple and devastating. I had access to everything, the recipes, the suppliers, the staff's loyalty. I knew every strength of Lorenzo's because I'd built them. One more thing, Rick said as we wrapped up. I have a property you might be interested in, right across the street from Lorenzo's, perfect for a restaurant. My heart skipped. I can't afford— You can with investors, he interrupted. I'm not the only one who's noticed your talent, Jackie. Give me a week to put together a proposal. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a call from Chad, the restaurant critic from the Herald. I'd forgotten he was supposed to review Lorenzo's this week. Jackie, his familiar voice boomed through the speaker. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you haven't left Lorenzo's. It's complicated, Chad. Uncomplicate it. I was coming to review your food, not whatever corporate garbage Summit's going to serve up. My column's due next week. I caught Rick's eye, an idea forming. What if you did both? Review Lorenzo's now, and then again, after Summit takes over? A before and after piece? There was a pause. A comparison piece showing how corporate acquisition affects beloved local restaurants? That's actually brilliant. But what about you? Please tell me you're not leaving the industry. Actually, I glanced at Rick, who nodded encouragingly. I might have some news for you soon about a new venture. After hanging up, Annika grabbed my arm. Jackie, this is perfect. Chad's review will be the final nail in the coffin. There's just one problem, I said. Margaret's still working the front of house. She'll recognize Chad the moment he walks in. No, she won't. Annika grinned wickedly. Because I'm still in the group chat with the staff. Margaret's got a wedding to attend this weekend, 3 hours away, and Terry never works Saturday nights anymore. Rick gathered his things, looking pleased. Sounds like the pieces are falling into place. I'll start working on the investment proposal. Jackie, are you sure you're ready for this? I thought about all the times Margaret had undermined me, all the times Terry had dismissed my input as kitchen stuff. I thought about the staff who'd trusted me, the customers who'd supported us, the dreams I'd poured into every dish. They want me to stay in my place? I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in days. Fine. My place is running a successful restaurant, just not theirs. As we left the cafe, my phone buzzed one more time. A message from Margaret. Dear, I hope you're done with this tantrum. Remember, a woman's reputation in this industry is fragile. Don't burn bridges you can't rebuild. I showed the message to Annika, who snorted. Oh, bridges will burn all right, but they're the ones who lit the match. Looking up at the bright summer sky, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since overhearing that conversation in the kitchen, I smiled. They thought they were ending my story. They didn't realize they were just setting up my comeback. The Herald's review hit like a bomb on Sunday morning. Chad had outdone himself, painting a vivid picture of Lorenzo's transformation from a neighborhood gem into a soulless corporate acquisition. The final paragraph was particularly scathing. With executive chef Jacqueline's departure and Summit Group's impending takeover, one must wonder, will Lorenzo's remain the heartbeat of authentic Italian cuisine or become another casualty of corporate standardization? Only time will tell, but this critic's recent experience suggests the heart of the restaurant left with its chef. My phone exploded with notifications. Terry called 6 times before I finally answered. What did you do? He demanded. Summit's threatening to pull out of the deal. I didn't do anything, I replied calmly. Chad reviewed the restaurant. Isn't that what you wanted? He came on the one night Mother and I weren't there, and suddenly half the staff called in sick, the wine deliveries were late, and the backup recipes were accidentally deleted from the system. I examined my nails. Sounds like management problems to me. Good thing Summit's coming to fix everything. Jackie, this isn't a game. Mother and I have already spent the first payment. We need this deal to close. I sat up straighter. You spent money you don't have yet? That doesn't sound like good business sense, Terry. The line went silent for a moment. Just come back. We can work something out. Give you a better position in the new structure. Sorry, I'm busy. Actually heading to a meeting right now. I hung up and walked into the sleek office building where Rick had arranged to meet potential investors. Annika was already there, dressed sharply and clutching a portfolio of our business plan. Ready to show them what you've got? She asked. I straightened my jacket. Born ready. The meeting room was intimidating, all glass and chrome, filled with serious-looking people in expensive suits. Rick stood at the head of the table, looking confident. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, I'm excited to present an extraordinary opportunity. Chef Jacqueline, recently featured in the Herald's Rising Stars of Cuisine, is launching a new contemporary Italian restaurant. But don't take my word for it. Taste for yourself. On cue, servers brought out samples of my signature dishes, the ones that had put Lorenzo's on the map. I'd spent all night cooking them in Rick's test kitchen. The room fell silent as they ate. One woman closed her eyes in obvious pleasure. A man in the corner actually licked his fork. The location is prime real estate, Rick continued, pulling up slides. Direct visibility from the main street and... He paused for effect. Directly across from the soon-to-be-struggling Lorenzo's. Questions flew rapid-fire. I answered each one with the confidence that came from years of running a successful restaurant, even if others hadn't acknowledged it. When I detailed my plans for modernizing traditional recipes, the woman who'd closed her eyes actually applauded. After the meeting, Rick was beaming. They're in. All of them. We can start construction next month. My phone buzzed again. A text from Carlos, my former sous chef. Summit's inspectors just left. They don't look happy. BTW, we all quit. When do you need us to start? I showed Rick the message. Looks like your complications are working. Summit's stock dropped 3 points after that review. He grinned. Their board is asking questions about the acquisition. Terry and Margaret's perfect plan is unraveling. Later that evening, I drove past Lorenzo's. Through the windows, I could see Margaret gesturing frantically at a group of people in suits, probably Summit executives. Terry sat at the bar, head in his hands. My phone rang. Margaret's number. How dare you? She hissed when I answered. Summit's cutting their offer in half. They say the restaurant's not worth what was promised. Funny how things change when the kitchen help leaves, isn't it? You ungrateful little... After everything we've done for you? I laughed. Everything you've done for me? I did everything for that restaurant. I made it what it is, and now I'm going to make something even better, without you. What are you talking about? Oh, didn't you hear? A new restaurant's opening across the street, contemporary Italian. Maybe you'll come try it sometime, if you can afford it after Summit's done with you. I hung up before she could respond, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Through the window, I watched her face turn red as she presumably read the text I just sent, a screenshot of the signed lease for the building across the street. Annika's car pulled up beside mine. Want to go celebrate? The investors loved you. Actually, I said, I need to go kitchen shopping. We've got a restaurant to build. And a family to destroy? I shook my head, watching Terry and Margaret argue through the window. They're destroying themselves. We're just making sure we succeed while they do it. As we drove away, I caught one last glimpse of Lorenzo's in my rearview mirror. The sign that had once filled me with pride now reminded me of a valuable lesson. Success is the best revenge, but it's even sweeter when served across the street. 6 months later, I stood in the gleaming kitchen of Jacqueline's, watching my team prepare for our grand opening. The space hummed with energy as Carlos directed the line cooks through our final prep, the familiar sense of garlic and fresh herbs filling the air. "Chef," Annika called from the dining room, "the photographer from Food and Wine is here." I wiped my hands and walked out to greet him, passing under the elegant sign that bore my name. Just my name, no one else's. The dining room was a vision of modern sophistication, with warm lighting and exposed brick walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a perfect view of Lorenzo's across the street, where Summit's generic signage now hung limply in the afternoon sun. "This location is interesting," the photographer said, glancing across the street. "Wasn't Lorenzo's quite popular before Summit took over?" "Was it?" I smiled innocently. I hadn't noticed their reviews lately. In truth, Lorenzo's was hemorrhaging customers. Summit's standardized menu and rotating cast of inexperienced chefs had turned the once bustling restaurant into just another chain outpost. Terry had taken to drinking at the bar most nights, while Margaret desperately tried to maintain her iron grip on an increasingly empty dining room. The photo shoot was interrupted by a commotion at the front door. Speak of the devil. Terry stood there, looking disheveled in his rumpled suit. "Jackie," he called out, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "Can we talk? Please?" I excused myself from the photographer and approached my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband once the papers went through. "You're drunk, Terry." "I'm desperate," he corrected, swaying slightly. "Summit's threatening to close Lorenzo's. Mother's having anxiety attacks. The bank..." He lowered his voice. "The bank is asking questions about our mortgage." "Sounds like business problems," I said coolly. "Better left to those who understand it, right?" He flinched at his own words being thrown back at him. "I was wrong, okay? We were wrong. I see that now." His eyes roamed the restaurant, taking in the sophisticated decor, the full reservation book, the staff moving with purpose and pride. "You've built something amazing here. Again. I know. Maybe..." He stepped closer, that old charming smile appearing. "Maybe we could work something out? A partnership? I could help manage the front of house like old times." The sad thing was, part of me still loved him. Part of me remembered the young chef who'd once supported my dreams before his mother's influence and his own insecurities had poisoned everything. "Chef," Carlos called from the kitchen. "Need you to taste the special." "I have to go," I told Terry. "I have a restaurant to run." "Jackie, please." "You should leave before the dinner rush starts," I cut him off. "We're fully booked tonight. Actually, we're fully booked for the next 3 months." As if to emphasize my point, Chad from the Herald walked in, notebook in hand. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Jackie, ready for that follow-up interview?" The response to my comparison piece was incredible. "People can't wait to hear about your new venture." Terry slunk away as I led Chad to a corner table. Through the windows, I could see Margaret standing outside Lorenzo's, watching us with a bitter expression. "So," Chad said, setting up his recorder, "tell me about the journey from Lorenzo's to Jacqueline's. It's quite a story of resilience. I glanced around my restaurant, my real restaurant, built on my terms. Actually, it's a story about knowing your worth, about not letting anyone tell you to stay in your place. The interview was interrupted by the arrival of Rick and several investors, all beaming with pride. Early numbers are exceeding projections, Rick announced. We're already talking about expansion possibilities. Expansion? Chad's eyebrows shot up. Do tell. As I outlined our future plans, I caught movement across the street. Terry was arguing with a man in a Summit corporate polo, gesturing wildly. Margaret stood in the doorway, her face pale as she watched another group of customers walk past Lorenzo's and head toward my restaurant instead. Chef, Annika appeared at my elbow. The first reservations are arriving. I excused myself and headed to the kitchen, pausing to straighten a frame on the wall. My culinary school diploma, displayed prominently where everyone could see it. Below it hung the recent review Chad had written about Lorenzo's post-summit takeover. A cautionary tale of corporate acquisition gone wrong. The kitchen doors swung open to organized chaos, exactly how I liked it. Flames leaped from skillets, fresh pasta rolled through gleaming machines, and my hand-picked team moved like a well-oiled machine. Orders are coming in, chef, Carlos grinned, handing me my apron. I tied it on, feeling the familiar weight settle around my waist. Through the kitchen window, I could see the dining room filling up with eager guests, while across the street, Lorenzo's stood nearly empty. All right, team, I called out, clapping my hands. Let's show them what we can do. The lunch rush was in full swing when Margaret stormed into Jacqueline's, her designer handbag swinging like a weapon. I watched through the kitchen window as Annika intercepted her. I'm sorry, we're fully booked, Annika said sweetly. Perhaps try across the street? I hear they have plenty of available tables. Don't play games with me, Margaret snapped. I need to speak with Jacqueline, now. I wiped my hands and stepped out of the kitchen. You can speak with me right here, Margaret. She looked around at my packed dining room, her face twisting. Summit is pulling out completely. They're terminating the contract and demanding their initial payment back. Are you happy now? You've destroyed everything. You destroyed everything, I corrected her, keeping my voice level. The moment you and Terry decided I was just the help. We were protecting you. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You never understood the business side. Remember when you first started? You couldn't even balance the books. The memory hit hard. My first month at Lorenzo's, struggling with the accounting software while Margaret watched over my shoulder, clicking her tongue disapprovingly. But that was then. Actually, Rick's voice cut in as he approached from the bar, Jacqueline's business plan is one of the most impressive I've seen in 20 years of restaurant investment. She just needed someone to believe in her abilities outside the kitchen. Margaret's face reddened. This is family business. Stay out of it. Family, I laughed. Was it family when you tricked me into signing away my rights? When you dismissed everything I built as kitchen stuff? We need help, she said, her voice cracking. Terry's drinking too much. The bank is threatening foreclosure on our house. Just tell us what you want. Money? A share in this place? I want you to leave, I said firmly. And I want you to remember this moment the next time you think about underestimating someone. You ungrateful little, she started, but stopped as Carlos appeared with 2 steaming plates. Chef, he said, the food critic from Taste magazine would like your opinion on her dishes. I turned away from Margaret. Please see yourself out. We have paying customers to attend to. As she left, I heard her mutter, You'll regret this. Family is everything. No, I called after her. Excellence is everything. That's what you never understood. The rest of the day passed in a blur of service and success. As the dinner rush wound down, Annika found me in my office, reviewing the day's numbers. You okay? She asked. That thing with Margaret was intense. I'm fine, I said, but my hands shook slightly as I set down my tablet. Just remembering things. Want to talk about it? I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked both restaurants. Lorenzo's was dark already. They'd stopped serving dinner weeks ago. When I first married Terry, Margaret took me aside and said she'd teach me everything about running a restaurant. But every lesson was really about staying in my place. The kitchen is your domain, she'd say. Leave the important decisions to those who know better. And now look who knows better, Annika smiled. My phone buzzed, a text from Terry. Please help. I'll do anything. I deleted it without responding. Chef! Carlos burst in. You need to see this. He held up his phone, showing a local news website. The headline read, Summit Restaurant Group faces investigation over fraudulent acquisition practices. They're saying Summit knew Lorenzo's books were manipulated before the sale, Carlos explained excitedly. They were trying to hide their own financial problems with quick acquisitions. Terry and Margaret could be implicated. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. They did it to themselves, I said quietly. Chef, one of the line cooks appeared at the door. There's a situation in the kitchen. The new sauce isn't setting right. I straightened up, pushing away the memories and regrets. Let's go fix it. In the kitchen, surrounded by the controlled chaos I loved, I felt my strength return. This was my domain, not because someone told me to stay here, but because I chose it. I'd mastered every aspect of the restaurant business, from the books to the cooking, and no one could take that away from me. Hey, Annika caught my arm as I passed. Remember what you told that journalist last week about success being the best revenge? I nodded. Well, I think you're wrong, she grinned. Success isn't revenge at all. It's justice. Through the kitchen window, I watched my dining room full of happy customers, my competent staff, my beautiful restaurant. Across the street, Lorenzo stood as a dark reminder of what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Order up, I called out, turning back to my kitchen. Let's show them how it's done. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick's voice carried across the packed dining room. Welcome to the official grand opening of Jacqueline's. Applause filled the space as I emerged from the kitchen, still wearing my chef's coat. The restaurant had been open for 2 months, but tonight was our formal celebration. Food critics, local celebrities, and loyal customers filled every table. Before we begin tonight's special tasting menu, Rick continued, our executive chef and owner would like to say a few words. I stepped up to the small podium, my hands trembling slightly. Through the windows, I could see Terry and Margaret standing across the street, watching. They'd received their official eviction notice from Lorenzo's that morning. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. Someone once told me that my place was in the kitchen, not in the boardroom. Knowing laughter rippled through the crowd, my story had become somewhat legendary in local restaurant circles. They were half right, I continued. My place is in the kitchen, and the boardroom, and anywhere else I choose to excel, because success isn't about staying in your place, it's about creating your own. More applause. I caught sight of Chad from the Herald nodding appreciatively, his pen flying across his notepad. Tonight's menu tells a story, I said. Each dish represents a step in my journey. From the appetizer, my grandmother's arancini recipe that first made me fall in love with cooking, to the dessert, a modern take on traditional tiramisu that represents where we're heading. As if on cue, the kitchen doors swung open and servers emerged with the first course. The timing was perfect, just as we'd rehearsed. But most importantly, I added, tonight celebrates the power of believing in yourself, even when others don't. Thank you to my incredible team, my loyal customers, and everyone who helped make this dream a reality. I raised my glass, and the room followed suit. Through the windows, I saw Margaret turn away, pulling a reluctant Terry with her. The evening progressed perfectly until the dessert course, when Annika rushed up to me in the kitchen. Terry's at the bar, she whispered. He's demanding to speak with you, says he won't leave until you hear him out. I found him slumped on a bar stool, looking worse than ever. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose. You need to leave, I said firmly. Jackie, please, he slurred slightly. The bank's taking the house. Mother's moving in with my sister. Everything's falling apart. That's what happens when you build success on lies, I replied. You taught me that. I was wrong, he said, his voice breaking. I let Mother control everything. I forgot who you really were, what you could do. Look at all this. He gestured around the restaurant. You did this without me. You did it better without me. Yes, I did. Give me another chance, he pleaded. I could work here, start at the bottom, prove myself. For a moment, I remembered the young chef I'd fallen in love with. the man who'd once supported my dreams before his mother poisoned everything. But that man was gone. "No, Terry," I said gently. "You can't work here. You can't be part of this. Because you never really believed in me. You just believed in controlling me." "Jackie." "Chef," Carlos appeared at my elbow. "The food critic from Bon Appetit is asking about the inspiration behind the dessert." I turned back to Terry. "You should go. Your mother's probably waiting." "She's not," he said quietly. "She blames me for everything. Says I should have controlled you better." "Controlled me?" I laughed. "That was always the problem, wasn't it? You and Margaret were so busy trying to keep me in my place that you never noticed I'd outgrown it." Rick approached, his expression concerned. "Everything okay here?" "Terry was just leaving," I said firmly. "You'll regret this," Terry muttered, but the words held no power anymore. "No," I replied. "I only regret not doing it sooner." As security escorted him out, I returned to the dining room, where happy customers were finishing their desserts. Chad caught my eye and raised his glass in a silent toast. "Chef," Carlos called from the kitchen, "we need you for the final plating." I took one last look through the windows at Lorenzo's dark interior, remembering all the dreams I'd poured into that space. But standing in my own restaurant, surrounded by people who respected and valued me, I realized those dreams hadn't been lost. They'd just found a better home. "Coming!" I called back, turning away from the window in my past. In the kitchen, my team waited with the final dessert plates, each one a perfect representation of tradition, transformed into something new and better, just like me. "Let's finish strong," I said, picking up my plating spoon. "We've got our own legacy to build." The morning sun streamed through Jacqueline's windows as I unlocked the front door, breathing in the familiar scent of fresh bread already baking. Carlos always arrived early to start the day's prep. A movement across the street caught my eye. Workers were taking down the Lorenzo sign, leaving a blank space where my old life had once been. The local paper had reported that a boutique clothing store would be moving in. No more restaurant competition. "Morning, chef," Annika breezed in, carrying 2 coffee cups. "Did you see the email from Food and Wine?" I nodded, unable to hold back my smile. The magazine had named Jacqueline's one of the top 10 new restaurants in America. The photo shoot was scheduled for next week. "Have you heard from Terry or Margaret?" she asked carefully. "Terry's sister called yesterday," I said, accepting the coffee. "Apparently, Margaret's driving her crazy, reorganizing her entire house and criticizing her cooking. Terry's staying with a friend, looking for work in another city." "Good riddance," Annika muttered. The kitchen doors swung open, and Carlos emerged with a fresh croissant. "Chef, you need to taste this new recipe. I think I've perfected the butter-to-dough ratio." As I bit into the perfectly flaky pastry, the front door chimed. Rick walked in, followed by an elegant woman I recognized from restaurant magazine covers, Diana, the famous restaurateur who owned venues across the country. "Jackie," Rick beamed, "Diana's been very interested in our success here." "Please," Diana held up her hand, "let me speak for myself." She turned to me, her eyes sharp and appraising. "I've been watching you, Jacqueline. The way you handled the Lorenzo situation, the way you built this place, it's impressive." "Thank you," I said cautiously. "I'm not here to buy you out," she smiled, reading my expression. "I'm here to propose a partnership, your recipes, your management style, your vision, but with the resources to expand. Multiple locations, each one unique, each one reflecting its community while maintaining your standards." Rick nodded encouragingly. "I've reviewed the proposal. It's solid, Jackie. You'd maintain creative control." "And who would run this location?" I asked. "You would," Diana replied. "This would be the flagship. I don't want to change what works. I want to help it grow." Before I could respond, the door chimed again. Margaret stood there, looking smaller somehow without her designer clothes and perfect makeup. "I need to speak with you," she said quietly. Diana raised an eyebrow. "Should we give you a moment?" "No," I said firmly. "Whatever she has to say, she can say in front of everyone." Margaret stepped forward, clutching her worn purse. "I came to apologize. I was wrong about you, about everything. A bit late for that, isn't it?" "Yes," she admitted, but I wanted you to know. Seeing what you've built here, how everyone respects you. I understand now what I tried to destroy, what I tried to keep Terry from seeing. And what's that? That you were never just the help, she said, her voice cracking. You were the heart, the vision, everything we pretended to be but weren't. I let her words hang in the air for a moment, then turned to Diana. Tell me more about this partnership. Margaret took the hint and left quietly, the door closing softly behind her. Diana smiled and pulled out a folder. Let's talk details. As we sat discussing expansion plans and creative control, I watched my staff prepare for the day. Carlos training a new line cook, Annika arranging the dining room with perfect precision, Rick adding his business insights to Diana's proposal. This was my real family. People who believed in excellence over control, support over suppression. One more thing, Diana said, sliding a final document across the table. We'll need a new name for the restaurant group. She tapped the proposed logo, Jacqueline's Restaurant Group, where vision meets tradition. Perfect, I smiled, picking up the pen. The door chimed one final time. A young woman in chef's whites stood nervously in the entrance. Can I help you? I asked. I'm here about the apprenticeship program, she said. The one for aspiring female chefs? My mother says I should stick to serving, but you want more, I finished for her. She nodded eagerly. I glanced at the empty space across the street where Lorenzo's sign had been, then back at this young chef with dreams in her eyes. Come on back to the kitchen, I said, standing up. Let's see what you can do. As I led her through my restaurant, my empire in the making, I caught my reflection in the polished surfaces. I saw not just a chef, not just a businesswoman, but someone who had refused to stay in her place. And now I could help others do the same. First lesson, I told my new apprentice, handing her an apron. Success isn't about fitting into someone else's kitchen, it's about building your own.
There was a major fire at Company X. In that moment, it felt like a heavy blow to my head because that was where my husband worked. I sincerely hoped he was safe. Anxiously, I dialed his number, praying he had escaped the fire. The phone rang, and it felt like my prayers were answered when I heard his voice say, "Hello." Overjoyed to have reached him, my voice unintentionally became louder as I asked, "Mateo, where are you? Are you safe?" However, my husband, seemingly annoyed, responded, "What's the matter with you? You're talking so loud. I'm at work. Don't call me while I'm working." The call abruptly ended. Despite my husband not being involved in the fire, his response was puzzling. "By the way, my name is Ava, and I'm 29 years old. I work as a nurse, and my job is a significant part of my life. I tied the knot 4 years ago at the age of 27. Fortunately, I've just entered my 30s. I encountered my spouse, Mateo, through a mutual friend, and we connected instantly. Currently, we're happily wedded and reside in housing provided by his workplace. While it's been 3 years since our marriage, we haven't welcomed children into our lives yet. Nevertheless, I am confident that we can build a happy family together. Mateo, my husband, may show a bit of self-centeredness occasionally, but overall, he is a kind and good-hearted person. He openly expresses his love, and I feel secure in our relationship. Recently, he's been extremely occupied with work, dedicating additional time even during his days off. I believe he's tired, and it appears that he's not giving me much focus when we're at home. Following dinner, he simply lounges on the couch in front of the TV, though he doesn't actively watch it. Instead, he's consistently engrossed in his phone while the TV serves as background noise. When I spoke with him, he only responded with simple expressions like "yeah" or "oh." Initially, I worried that I might have said something to upset him. However, I chose to believe that he was simply fatigued from his demanding work schedule. If he was indeed that tired, I resolved to ensure he had lunch and dinner taken care of daily. I made an effort to prepare nutritious and well-balanced meals for his daily lunch and dinner. Then something unusual occurred one day. A coworker called me the day before, asking to switch shifts between day and night unexpectedly. I had initially informed my husband that I would be working the night shift, so I intended to let him know about the shift change. Due to a busy schedule, I ended up sending him an email on the same day, informing him about the switch to the day shift, and expressing my intention to make dinner and wait for him. Unfortunately, I received no response. Assuming he was occupied with work, I focused on my own tasks. However, even after finishing my work, there was still no reply from him. He used to respond promptly, even when I was at work, sometimes adding emojis to his texts. However, this time, he only read my message and didn't reply. I wondered if he was working extra hard, or if this was what happens after 3 years of marriage. Feeling a bit down, I stopped by the supermarket on my way home from work and picked up ingredients. I had decided to cook a nutritious dinner for my husband as I usually do. Since it was very cold that day, I opted to make a one-pot dish. I chopped up the ingredients and eagerly awaited my husband's return to start cooking. However, no matter how long I waited, he didn't come home. Usually he arrives by 7 p.m., but this time he walked in at 10 p.m. "Hey, welcome back. You're back home late today. Did you have to work extra hours?" I inquired. "Yeah, I had to. A colleague had an emergency. Sorry for not letting you know in advance," he explained. "I get it, but it's a bit disappointing to find out on the same day. I could have made plans for a drink or something." I shared my feelings. "You're right. I'm sorry," he acknowledged, and I switched on the stove to start cooking. "Oh, did you already eat?" "No, I figured I'd wait for you." "Well, appreciate it, but you don't have to wait next time." It made me a little sad hearing my husband express that. I patiently waited for the pot to heat up, and once it began simmering, I dished out my husband's serving before mine. After waiting so long, I was really hungry. While savoring the tasty hot pot, I observed that my husband wasn't eating a lot. I intend to eat it for breakfast tomorrow. He tried to lift my spirits. Later, my husband stretched out on the sofa. After a short while, he abruptly stood up and said, "I'm going for a stroll." That's uncommon. When I asked about it, he explained, "I haven't been getting sufficient exercise lately, and I've been working late, so I need a change of routine." He began getting ready to head out. Sitting alone at the table, eating hot pot and feeling a bit lonely, I saved my share in the refrigerator. I was curious about who in the world he was talking to. A few minutes later, a car pulled in and my husband approached the car, engaging in a casual conversation with the person in the driver's seat. Since it was dark and hard to see, I moved closer to the car. Soon I noticed a person in the driver's seat, a woman with long curly hair and glossy lipstick. She was laughing happily as my husband joined her in the passenger seat. My thoughts quickly turned to the possibility of an affair. By the time I considered this, the car with both of them had already driven away. I stood there, stunned, for a while. Soon after, my husband sent me a text message, claiming that he happened to meet someone he knew and would be home a little late. His explanation seemed sudden and unconvincing. He mentioned earlier that he had already eaten and wasn't hungry, but it was past 1 a.m. when he finally got home. Unaware that I was awake, he seemed a bit tipsy and went to the kitchen for water. After that, he started working overtime more often, especially when I was on the day shift. Coordinating our days off became even trickier. Yesterday, he worked late, and today, he had to work on his day off. I started to wonder if it was genuinely work-related. I couldn't shake the feeling that he might be meeting the woman I saw that day. Unable to ignore these suspicions, I went online to search for detective agencies. Before I realized it, I ended up submitting an investigation request to the most trustworthy one. I felt uneasy investigating without letting my husband know. But if everything turned out okay, I could trust him again, so I chose to have someone check it out. Waiting for the investigation results was hard. My husband stayed silent as usual, but thoughts of the other woman lingered whenever I saw his face. I wanted clarity quickly. Then something amazing happened on a Saturday while I was working the day shift. Surprisingly, my husband was also at work on his day off. Lost in my tasks, I thought there was no need to worry since we were both working. Suddenly, the distant sirens of a fire truck interrupted. The sound grew closer, and just when I assumed they were passing by, more sirens joined in. It indicated a significant fire nearby, making me uneasy. 2 coworkers came back from the hospital room, their faces filled with concern as they talked about the fire. "Are you talking about the fire?" "Exactly. There's a major fire at Company X." In that instant, it felt as if a sudden shock struck me because Company X was the place where my spouse was employed. I quickly told my coworkers about the situation, and then I phoned my husband to make sure he was okay. "Stay safe, please." Keeping that thought in my mind, I dialed his number. Despite not talking much recently, I always said goodbye when he left for work in the morning. I prayed and wished that he had gotten away from the fire. The phone rang, and it felt like my prayers were heard when I heard my husband's voice say, "Hello. Mateo, are you okay?" I felt a rush of relief as I managed to get through to him, but in my excitement my voice unintentionally became louder. Annoyed, my husband responded, "Why are you shouting? I'm at work, don't call me while I'm working." The call abruptly ended. Thankfully, my husband wasn't caught up in the fire, but his reaction puzzled me. With a fire and multiple fire trucks at the scene, it seemed improbable that he could be working as usual. Did he skip going to work? And why was he so distant when I was genuinely concerned about his safety? I grew increasingly upset with my husband, suspecting he might be involved with another woman since we got married. Filled with frustration, I finally decided to leave the house. As soon as I returned home, I began packing my belongings. While checking the mailbox, I found the detective agency's results, confirming my suspicions. Determined to confront the situation, I left the house with the investigation results. My parents assisted me in packing, and the contractor was on the way. Swiftly, I moved my belongings out. My husband remained oblivious to my knowledge of the truth. He didn't contact me that night, and I assumed he was with his lover. I packed my furniture and appliances from my single days, leaving the room nearly empty and desolate. As I gazed at the space, I realized I had no sentimental attachment to the life within those walls. Temporarily relocating to my parents' house, I began searching for a new place to live independently. My husband called me the following day and said, "Hey, what's going on? I noticed a lot of your stuff is gone." I replied, "Well, I've moved out of our house." He exclaimed, "What? Why would you do that?" Worried, he asked, "When are you coming back? What about our meals and the household tasks?" I was surprised and said, "Is that all you think about when it comes to me?" While conversing with him, it brought back memories of the incident at my husband's job. This person chose to be with his secret partner instead of going to work. Recalling that, anger surged within me. Why not seek someone else for that, huh? What are you saying? Weren't you spending time with a woman named Linda today? Huh? What are you talking about? I was at the office working. How long were you working today? It turned out to be a busy day, even though it was supposed to be my day off. I was busy until late in the evening. Oh, I understand. That's why I was shocked to discover that you've relocated. Why do you continue to tell untruths? What's the deal? You weren't truthful about going to work, were you? I wasn't dishonest, I was genuinely working. What's going on? How could I have been working late into the evening when there was a fire in the office earlier that day? When I contacted you, multiple fire trucks had been dispatched to your company. They were there to put out a fire that erupted at your office. That's the reason for my call. I wanted to confirm your safety. Despite your usual request not to disturb you at work, you spoke as if there was no fire. Interestingly, I have proof of the incident from a detective agency. You can't escape this. All communication must go through my lawyer. I'll make sure I receive the alimony. Oh no. My husband begged for forgiveness and apologized, but I no longer have feelings for him. I'm sorry, there's no way to fix it. I'm hanging up now. Wait. I consulted my lawyer, demanded a divorce, and asked for alimony. The divorce was finalized, and he couldn't escape it with all the evidence. Both my husband and the adulterer paid a fair amount of alimony. Interestingly, my husband's partner was a junior colleague at the same workplace. News of the affair spread quickly through the company. The fact that they were involved during a fire at the company caused a lot of negativity among colleagues. They're now getting cold stares from everyone and feeling very ashamed. They truly deserve it. Meanwhile, I moved to a new apartment and am enjoying a comfortable single life, hoping to meet a sincere man in the future. Being a nurse gives me a stable job, so I'm not in a hurry to jump into a relationship. I'm taking my time and savoring my own moments. She discovered her husband's affair unexpectedly due to the fire at his workplace. However, he shouldn't have had an affair in the first place, and she would have eventually found out. I believe he deserves the consequences. Enjoy your time as a single nurse. My brother invited us, so we won't be paying rent or utilities. We're relying on you, Isla. I work in finance, and my husband, whom I'll call Bob, is a car mechanic. We live in my childhood home, but not where my parents live. It's a family business my father used to run. My brother was supposed to take over, so he studied economics and even went to Oxford. After working with my father for 5 years, my parents retired to Aspen, and my brother got the company. They passed the family home to me, and I lived there with my husband. The house is conveniently located close to public transportation, hospitals, and schools. We're grateful for the gift and planned on expanding our family. However, life took an unexpected turn. My mother-in-law started visiting often, asking about my parents' finances and inheritance. It feels distasteful, and we never imagined our happy life would be disrupted like this. Not wanting to be too direct, I responded with a casual, I wonder how much. I've never really thought about it, so I don't know. I already got the house, so maybe no money. Even though I laughed it off, she insisted, that can't be true, can it? Your parents are over 57. You never know what might happen. They must have talked about their assets with you. It seemed like she was quite interested in discussing assets, and at that moment I felt she might be counting on my parents' wealth. I actually knew the amount I would inherit but chose to stay silent, thinking it's better not to share with my mother-in-law or my husband, who is close to her. Out of the blue, something unexpected happened. Without any heads up, at around 7 a.m. on a holiday, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family showed up at our doorstep and moved into our house. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, I was greeted by a group of movers. I was taken aback and puzzled, asking, "What brings the movers here?" That's when my mother-in-law and brother-in-law's family announced, "We've decided to live here starting today, so please welcome us and take care of us." As I glimpsed their happy expressions, a sudden chill ran down my back. Just then, my husband awoke. When I inquired about the situation, he nonchalantly remarked, "What's the issue if Mom and the others shift into this house? It's quite spacious. Surely you can spare some room." He spoke as if it were entirely normal to accommodate them. I was already taken aback by us living together. But then my sister-in-law made an even more audacious statement. She asserted, "Brother Isla invited us. Since he called us, we won't be paying any rent or utilities. We're relying on you, Isla." Meanwhile, my brother-in-law started claiming different rooms without asking, stating, "This room gets great sunlight, so let us have it, Bob. Move everything out to the hallway." I felt confused in this situation. Although it's my house, they act like it's theirs, claiming and entering rooms freely. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family seemed to be lacking basic courtesy, particularly my sister-in-law, who once rifled through my bag without asking. If this continues, it's becoming worrisome. Enough is enough. They've taken over my room. This is my house, and it's frustrating how they act like they own the place. Normally, I don't lose my composure, but the way these people moved in without permission and treated it as if it were theirs pushed me over the edge. I couldn't stand it, so I raised my voice and told them to leave. Unexpectedly, they responded with arrogance, telling me to leave instead. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a sharp pain on my cheek. Did I just get slapped? The realization hit me seconds later, leaving me stunned and in disbelief. The throbbing pain lingered, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. I can't live with people who would treat me like this in my own house. Despite it being mine, I don't want them living here like parasites. I decided to pack up my things and leave, intending to inform my family about the situation. I needed to find a place away from home, so I rented a monthly apartment for the time being. From there, I had to commute to work. When I shared this news with my parents over the phone, I sensed their anger, especially from my usually doting dad. Despite being a strict CEO, he had always been a kind and supportive father. I didn't want to burden my retiring parents with this situation, but I had no choice. My inherited house was being taken away while I lived in the monthly apartment. I was certain that my husband and his family were freely using my house. Following the advice of my brother and father, I took action. A few days later, during my break, I checked my phone and saw numerous missed calls and messages from my husband. I knew exactly why he was trying to reach me. I contacted the water and electric companies to disconnect the utilities. Our house relies entirely on electricity, and we haven't set up solar panels yet, so there's no alternative power source. Given the current heat, living without electricity and water must be challenging. Anticipating my husband's concerns, he called just as I was about to dismiss it during my break. "What's happening? There's no electricity and the water isn't working. Did you stop them?" My husband's panicked voice came through the phone, making it clear he was worried. Since the house is now mine, I couldn't justify keeping the utilities on while I'm away. Turning them off seemed reasonable to avoid unnecessary bills. However, my husband was furious, insisting that I renew the contracts immediately. Just because he wanted me to renew didn't mean I was obliged to comply right away. I'm not going to agree just because they want to renew. If they wish to continue, they should use their own money. They keep saying it's my house, so I should pay, but their words and actions don't align. I have no plans to renew the contract or foot the bill. If they don't like it, they should leave the house immediately. After stating that, I ended the call as my break was ending. Later, my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and brother-in-law all called, echoing the same request. They wanted me to reconnect the electricity and water because their room was uncomfortable. They claimed it was inconvenient without water. However, I saw it as their problem, not mine. After hearing them out, I insisted they handle it on their own and hung up. Thinking their greed for money would lead them to leave soon, I was surprised that even after a week, they showed no signs of leaving. To take a stronger stance, I sought advice from my father's company lawyer and asked him to send a notice to my husband. The notice addressed the issue of trespassing since they had forcefully entered the house. Without any discussion, they drove me out of the property I owned, using it as if it were theirs. Faced with this deceitful tactic by the four of them, I mentioned the possibility of taking legal action. Curious and alarmed, my husband approached me, questioning why I received a document from a lawyer. He seemed taken aback by my decision to escalate the matter. Aware of their concern for public image, the thought of a lawsuit weighed heavily on them. While they certainly want to avoid legal involvement, giving up their current lifestyle is not an option. Hence, they are likely strategizing to convince me to let them continue as they are. Seeing through my husband's intentions, it's clear he's trying to manipulate the situation. However, I refused to entertain their proposals. I didn't give in to my husband's demands. In response, he lost his temper, forgetting he was at work, and shouted at me, telling me to stop acting all high and mighty just because things got a bit tricky. He insisted that I revert to how things were immediately and drop the idea of involving a lawyer. Despite his angry outburst, it didn't bother me at all. In fact, I found his phone call annoying, thinking about how audacious it was for him to try taking over someone else's house. No matter how much he yelled or shouted, my stance remained unchanged. If he continued to occupy the property without my consent, I was determined to take legal action. I told him to think carefully before making any moves. Despite his ongoing rant over the phone, I ignored him and hung up, considering it a waste of time. I had already consulted with my lawyer about divorce. Upon returning home, I found missed calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. I suspected they were reaching out to discuss settling the matter, but I remained firm in my resolve. To avoid wasting more time, I decided to block their numbers, putting an end to their incessant calls. Faced with the prospect of legal action, my husband's proud family couldn't bear the pressure. They packed their bags and left the house. Following their departure, the lawyer stepped in, facilitating smooth divorce negotiations. I took the opportunity to arrange for a house cleaning service, restoring my home to its sparkling clean state. Living separately from my husband's family and in a monthly rental was a comfortable interim arrangement. However, being back in my own home is undoubtedly the best. The house shows signs of wear in some areas, prompting me to consider renovation. Consulting with my father, he recommended a reliable contractor, and discussions about the renovation began. Living alone has proven to be incredibly comfortable. I'm not constrained by anyone, free to lounge on the sofa without fear of reprimand. I can enjoy any meal without anyone passing judgment. As I relish my current lifestyle, the prospect of renovating my home adds an exciting dimension to the newfound freedom. As I begged him, he began speaking without asking me first. It seems my ex-husband's business is facing a serious money problem, and as a result, he had to agree to a lower salary. Also, my mother-in-law isn't doing well health-wise, which stops her from working. My sister-in-law and her husband can't help much with our living costs since he doesn't have a stable job. Even though my sister-in-law is juggling several part-time jobs, most of her earnings are used to settle the debts accumulated by my brother-in-law. The situation is really hard, and my ex-husband is having a tough time making ends meet. His salary has been reduced, and it's getting harder to get by. When I heard all this, I couldn't help but think, wow, really? Despite their financial struggles, my feelings haven't changed. They entered my home without permission, did whatever they wanted, and even attempted to force me out. It's truly unbelievable. I don't feel any sympathy for those who did such a thing. Even if you're going through difficulties, it doesn't fix anything. It's your family. You need to handle it on your own. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it. My ex-husband got even more worried when I mentioned, "Don't say things like that. We're in real trouble. We might not even afford the rent for our place, and tomorrow we could be struggling for food." "Hey, we used to be a family, right? Please help us," he pleaded, almost in tears. However, I wasn't convinced. When I faced difficulties before, he didn't lift a finger to help, and both he and my mother-in-law looked down on me. It's not just my ex-husband and mother-in-law. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law have always treated me poorly. They insulted me for my simple looks and old-fashioned beliefs, telling me to stay away because they thought my stiffness and outdated ways were affecting them. They didn't care about how much it hurt me. Speaking of my mother-in-law, she not only made things worse but also pressured me to have a baby as soon as possible. She pushed strange herbal medicines on me, scheduled unnecessary doctor's appointments, and spread rumors among the neighbors that I was a barren wife. Looking back, it was a difficult situation. My marriage had no positives. My ex-husband, once kind, turned into my mother-in-law's puppet after we wed. On the first day my mother-in-law came to our house, I was away for an appointment. She got upset and cried to my husband, saying she wanted to see Isla, but I wasn't there. Despite her tears, my ex-husband yelled at me without hearing my side of the story. She claimed to want to get along, but every time we met, she only spoke ill of me. Loudly, she said things like, "My son seems to have lost weight lately. Is it because your cooking is so bad that he can't eat properly?" This happened at home and outside, making it impossible for us to get along. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law also joined in, laughing at me. "I can't deal with people acting like this anymore. No matter what you say, my feelings won't change. I can't assist you guys, so I'm ending this call now. Please don't contact me again." I hung up the phone and blocked the new number, knowing my ex-husband might change it and try to contact me again. To avoid this, I decided to change my phone number at the store over the weekend. But before I could do that, those 4 individuals took action. They broke the promise made by the lawyer and suddenly showed up at my house at 10 p.m. They were banging on the door, yelling without considering the late hour. I called out, "What's the matter at this hour? Please go back home, it's causing a nuisance to the neighbors." When I went to open the door, they seemed ready to barge in, so I thought of talking through the intercom. However, the 4 of them didn't care and continued banging on the door, creating a ruckus. I couldn't believe I was dealing with people so out of control. Left holding my head in my hands, I seriously contemplated calling the cops. Upon hearing sirens nearby, it appeared that a neighbor had intervened. The group, taken aback by the sudden police sirens, assumed I had alerted the authorities and attempted to run away. Unfortunately, a gathering of people had already formed, blocking any possibility of escape. As a result, the responding officers escorted all 4 individuals to the police station. I was questioned about what happened and explained all the details. The news about my ex-husband and his friend's actions quickly spread around the neighborhood. It was discovered that one of my ex-husband's colleagues was in the group, and by the following day, everyone at the office knew about the situation. He was already facing difficulties with a reduced salary, and involving the police only made things tougher for him at work. Due to this, my ex-husband lost his job and couldn't pay for his apartment anymore. Money problems caused a rift between him and his sister's family, leading to them no longer living together. Right now, Bob lives in government-assisted housing with his mother, working several part-time jobs to cover their expenses. Even his mother, dealing with financial challenges, has taken up part-time work a few days a week, trying hard to earn some money. I'm Ava, 27 years old, working. My grandfather, who raised me, died 3 months ago. Today, the lawyer opens his will. Visiting with my older sister Emma, my only family, as our parents died in an accident 17 years ago. Since our grandmother's death, Grandpa's health declined. He'd joke about me checking on him, but today is different. Found him in pain, called an ambulance, but he passed away. "Prepare some tea," snapped my sister, disrupting my thoughts. The lawyer's arrival is imminent. Same old, I muttered quietly while putting the kettle on the stove. My sister has always been self-centered. Since her teens, she dyed her hair like it was second nature, hung out with troublemakers, and constantly demanded money without working. Even when she caused trouble, I, being the quiet one, dealt with the fallout while she remained unfazed. Even as an adult, not much seems to have changed. She lacks a stable job and drifts around doing part-time work. I knew she asked Grandpa for money when I wasn't around. It's likely she finds it troublesome, but the inheritance changes the game. "You must be the lawyer. Thanks for coming," I heard my sister's formal voice, signaling the lawyer's arrival. I rushed to fill the teapot with tea leaves and then headed to the door. Thanks for being here today. I had met the lawyer at the funeral, and his eyes were as warm as my grandfather's. A shiny badge adorned his chest, indicating his profession. After paying respects to my grandfather's portrait, he sipped the tea I provided and presented the will my grandfather had entrusted to him while alive. The message was straightforward. My older sister, Emma, was set to receive $15 million in cash, while I, the younger daughter, would inherit the house and its land. Upon hearing this, my sister couldn't hold back her laughter. $15 million for the older sister, and only an old house for the younger one. How funny. It fits someone as plain as you. It's not just the house, there's also the land, I retorted. My sister dismissed it with a scoff. Huh. The value of this land in such a remote place is not impressive. I would have preferred cash. I suppose Grandpa must have favored me after all. I have to admit, I'm a bit surprised. It seems my grandfather wanted me to look after his beloved house and the land where he lived with my grandmother. A house and land. That's quite something, right? Dylan, my boyfriend, was surprised when he heard my story. I disagreed, indicating it's not as amazing as it seems. Not really, my sister got $15 million in cash. Now that's impressive. Saying it aloud left me with a sense of emptiness, even though I was trying to be humble. Expressing it felt like admitting something. Wow, she's both gorgeous and wealthy. She's the better off one, remarked Dylan. I gave Dylan a sideways look for his thoughtless comment. Realizing his mistake, he chuckled and said, "Your well-being is more important to me than money, Ava." Dylan and I have been together since I began working. We connected at a social gathering, and being the same age, we hit it off. I introduced him to my grandfather and sister. Even though he hasn't asked me to marry him, I've been pondering the idea of marriage. Today was our first date outdoors, and while we were out, I told Dylan about my family's possessions. Back then, I thought he could be the one I'd marry, but little did I realize that I would later regret that choice. A few days afterward, I found myself at the family home passed down from my grandfather. Initially, my plan was to tidy up and arrange his things. The place was big, but the house was simple. I thought I could manage the job alone. As I looked around, an idea popped into my head. It's close to where I work. Maybe I should move here. The thought of a relaxed life with a cat sounded nice. No rent worries, and even with possible upkeep expenses, I had saved money diligently. Considering the chance of sharing this space with Dylan, I felt a bit awkward and quickly dropped the idea. Eager to start cleaning, I rolled up my sleeves when suddenly a call interrupted my plans. My sister's name flashed on my smartphone screen. "Sis, what's going on?" "Hey, Ava, enjoying yourself all alone in that old house?" My sister seemed to be intoxicated. She always had a unique way of speaking, but today it was particularly noticeable. "You're having a drink in the afternoon, huh?" "It's still early," I remarked with a sigh. She responded with a dramatic sigh, saying, "Oh, you're such a Miss Goody Two-Shoes." I was correct. She had indeed been drinking. Trying to wrap up the conversation swiftly, I replied to my sister's question. "I was considering moving here eventually." "Really? I'm currently enjoying a fancy suite in a luxury hotel," my sister exclaimed in a somewhat exaggerated manner. "Guess who I'm hanging out with at the moment?" I asked. "I don't know." "Not interested," I responded. "Having that kind of mindset might make Dylan not like you," she cautioned. "What?" I exclaimed. Suddenly, Dylan's voice came through the phone. This unexpected interruption caught me off guard, and confusing thoughts swirled in my mind. I tried to dismiss my imagination, but by now an unsettling scenario had taken shape in my head. "Caught off guard, huh?" My sister's harsh words lingered in my ears. "Ever since you introduced me to Dylan, I found him to be quite special." She confidently shared how she became interested in Dylan after our introduction, how she found out where he worked through me, and how she approached him after his work hours. He willingly went along with her and even declared that she was more attractive than me, leaving me in shock. "Ava, I'm truly sorry," I finally managed to utter. The next voice I heard was Dylan's, asking me to confirm if it was a mistake. As I struggled to find the right words, he continued, explaining that as a man he felt compelled to seize the opportunity. "What? I feel guilty about it, but seriously, who can resist a gorgeous woman with $15 million, right?" The way he talked made me feel like he expected me to get it, sucking the emotion out of me. A chill ran through me, as if my blood was draining away. "You know what? "I don't want a guy like you," I stated. In response, I could hear my sister bursting into laughter in the background. The voice on the phone switched back to my sister, saying matter-of-factly, "Well, that's how it is. From now on, let's not think of ourselves as sisters. I wouldn't want you to contact me just because you're facing financial difficulties." With those words, she ended the call, leaving me flooded with delayed emotions. All I could do was express my feelings through tears. 7 years have passed since then, and now I have a cat on my lap, peacefully sleeping in front of my laptop, purring contentedly. Today is my day off, but there's still some unfinished work from the office. I felt a twinge of guilt, but I needed to move the cat from my lap. As I reached out, my phone began to ring. An unfamiliar number appeared on my smartphone. Thinking it might be work-related, I answered the call without suspicion. "Hello? Ava, long time no see." I recognized the person right away and stood still. The way of speaking was clearly my sister Ava's. "It's you, Ava, right? I can tell from your first hello. I'm your older sister, after all." It had been 7 years, making Emma 29. I couldn't help but smirk at her consistent way of talking. "You haven't changed at all. By the way, I returned home and there's a hotel there now. Did you sell the house?" "That's not something you need to know." "Oh, really? This hotel is so fancy, isn't it? You must have earned a nice amount of money, right?" Growing frustrated, I was on the verge of hanging up when she began sharing details about her present circumstances. Emma explained that she had spent her inheritance in just 1 year and was now facing a substantial amount of debt. Even Dylan, the person she's still spending time with, seemed to be overwhelmed by debt. I was left without words. Frankly, I couldn't be any less concerned, so can you lend me some money? Against Emma's loud shouting, I responded calmly. "I've always wondered why Grandpa divided his estate that way, but it wasn't until the day you took V away from me and severed ties that I understood." I started speaking slowly, recalling 7 years ago when Dylan ended our relationship. I was devastated. After crying my heart out, I sat in my room in a daze, staring into space, berating myself for being foolish. As I murmured these thoughts, large tears began to spill again. I spotted a painting I made when I was a kid, a gift from my grandfather. He had carefully framed it and displayed it. With shaky hands, I took the painting and softly said, "Grandpa." As waves of memories and a sense of being alone washed over me, tears began to fall. That's when I noticed something falling from behind the frame. I picked it up and found a new piece of notepaper with my name on it. I have fond memories from my childhood when I used to attach notes to the back of a picture frame, exchanging secret messages with my grandfather. It felt like our family's personal journal. Knowing that I would inherit the house, he probably expected me to find one of those notes, and I'm grateful that I did. As I read the letter addressed to Ava, I discovered it was written just before my grandfather's passing. He expressed his belief that I would notice it and mentioned his unusual distribution of the estate. Cash was allocated to my sister, while an old house and land were designated for me. Despite the appearance of favoritism toward my sister, Grandpa clarified that he intended to leave the majority to me, the one who cared for him till the end. It dawned on me that I had misunderstood something. Despite Emma's claims and words that had hurt me deeply, Grandpa valued me more than I had realized. Reading further, I learned about Emma's dissatisfaction with irregular division and her greediness. Apparently, she even took my boyfriend from me. Grandpa admitted in the letter that he arranged the distribution this way to ensure Emma wouldn't pay much attention to my share. He highlighted the increasing value of the land in our area due to ongoing urban development. Although it's not currently worth as much as Emma's $15 million, the letter assured me that the value of the land would surely rise in the future. As I perused this section of the letter, my eyes widened with surprise. Grandpa's words presented me with two choices: either stay in the house if I had a sentimental connection to it, or sell it later for a nice profit as its value increased. His main concern was my happiness. When I shared the contents of the letter with Emma, she clicked her tongue and playfully called me a hag. Having resided in that house for a considerable time, I eventually heeded Grandpa's counsel after my marriage and decided to sell, considering the escalating land value. Emma, feeling vexed, declined to lend me money. Then she made an offer. She said if I wanted, she could return Dylan to me to assist my sister, presenting it as a favorable arrangement. In that moment, something broke inside me, and I had reached my limit. Despite Grandpa looking after her, Emma had not shown any appreciation, and I resented her for it. I proclaimed that she was no longer my sister, emphasized my commitment to my marriage, turned down Dylan, and urged her to stay out of my life. After expressing my emotions, I hung up, activated call blocking, and apologized to my cat, who was hiding on the bed. Shortly after, it appeared that Emma got in touch with Dylan, and they both entered our old house forcefully. I wondered if they were trying to bring Dylan back to me. There's a proper ending now, but they got something wrong. They were yelling that they were my family, even though I just sold the land and had nothing to do with it. It's simple for those one. I sold the land and a building was constructed. This somehow made them think I must be the owner. Of course, the staff reported it to the police. The three of them were arrested because they had damaged several things in the building. Moreover, it was found out that they had been involved in marriage fraud for money in the past. It seems they'll be sent to prison together. I got questioned by the police too, but I easily showed I had no link because we were estranged. So, they let me go. While my husband and I were walking through the station, we heard shouting and looked over. There, we saw Emma and Dylan, looking completely changed. Luckily, they didn't see us. Their hair was messy, clothes were worn out, and they seemed nothing like the people I knew. Emma, especially, who always cared about makeup and fashion, looked totally different. They were probably being moved to another location. While watching them with a sense of sadness, my husband and I exchanged glances. Taking his outstretched hand, we left the police station. "Are you all right?" My caring husband gazed at me with gentle eyes. "I'm fine. I have you and our little one," I replied, patting my slightly protruding belly and smiling back. Inside me, a new addition to our family is developing. Money holds significance, but there's something even more valuable. That's the lesson I wish to impart to our child, with my husband beside me.
I received a call informing me that my husband, William, had a fall and was rushed to the hospital. The surgeon reported that the operation was successful, but William had yet to regain consciousness. The doctor mentioned that he might wake up soon, or it could take up to a year. Hearing this news, I crumbled in despair. The following day, my nephew James paid a visit to the hospital room, someone I hadn't seen in years. "Auntie, Uncle William left something for me to give to you a while back," he shared, handing me a letter. He insisted I read it in private. Alone, I perused the letter, discovering an astonishing confession from William. To validate his revelation, I examined the unconscious William and found evidence that confirmed the letter's contents. Unbeknownst to me, William's secret was exposed, setting off unforeseen events. William and I got married early compared to our friends because we got along really well. When I started enjoying my job, I told William that I wanted to keep working even after we got married. We both agreed to support each other. Over the years, we stayed close as a couple. Before I turned 29, I told William that I wanted to have children, and he felt the same way. We actively began trying to have a baby. One day, William's father, who had voluntarily admitted himself to an institution and whom we regularly visited, unexpectedly passed away. The last time we saw him was just 2 weeks ago, and he seemed fine. His sudden death shocked us, and the loss affected us so deeply that we found it hard to eat. While my father-in-law was alive, he provided substantial support to us. William and I tied the knot in our early 20s, a time when William's income was modest. Initially, we relied heavily on the assistance of my in-laws, especially for food supplies. As time progressed, our financial situation improved, enabling us to contemplate starting a family and thinking about how to express our gratitude to my father-in-law. However, just as we were making plans to repay him, he made the decision to relocate to a facility. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law had already passed away a year earlier, and we couldn't fulfill our debt to her. Upon moving to the facility, my father-in-law sold the family home and land, presumably using the proceeds to cover his expenses there. He once talked about giving some of his money to William as an early inheritance, saying he had more than enough for the years ahead. William, not wanting to stress about it, told him to enjoy his money and said no to the inheritance. Little did we know that after my mother-in-law passed away, my father-in-law would leave us so unexpectedly. William wished he had insisted on living together and could have repaid his father's kindness. However, we couldn't grieve forever, as another challenging situation with William's older sister was looming. I haven't had many interactions with her, and she's known to be a bit difficult. When my mother-in-law passed away, she showed more interest in the inheritance than in comforting my grieving father-in-law and us. Even before the funeral, she aggressively demanded her share of the inheritance. In an attempt to quiet his demanding daughter, my father-in-law reluctantly gave her what he called severance money, on the condition that she never contact him again. We interpreted this as a form of disownment. Since then, she hasn't appeared before my father-in-law, and she's been wanting to see him. However, he hasn't shared his whereabouts, making it impossible for her to find him. William and I were unaware of the sale of his parents' house, and it seemed like his sister hadn't visited there either. Consequently, she likely didn't know that the house and land had already been sold. Knowing her, she might demand a share of the sale proceeds once she finds out. While we could keep my father-in-law's death a secret, dealing with her complaints later would be unpleasant. So we decided to contact her and distribute everything equally to avoid potential future issues. The challenge lies in the will my father-in-law was very concerned about. He wanted to prevent his sister from acting impulsively after his death, so he planned to meet with a lawyer to leave a clear and explicit will. About 1 week ago, I got wind of a situation during our last meeting. Unfortunately, my father-in-law passed away before anything could be done about it. William needed to talk to his sister, so he called her mobile. Uncertain if she would answer, after a lengthy ring, she picked up. William skipped the usual greetings and got straight to the point, informing her about my father-in-law's death, the funeral arrangements, and the inheritance matters. However, as time went on, William's patience wore thin. His sister has a loud voice, and I could hear her loud and clear through the phone. Despite the circumstances, she didn't express any condolences for my father-in-law. Instead, she skipped mourning and went straight to demanding her share of the inheritance. Despite his frustration, William tried to keep his composure during the conversation, but it seemed like she dominated the discussion. After hanging up, William was visibly upset and revealed that she had recently gone through a divorce. He mentioned that they would discuss the inheritance distribution after the funeral. William was particularly concerned about his nephew, her son. Although she brought up her divorce, there was no mention of how or where her son was doing. Every attempt to bring him up was overshadowed by the ongoing inheritance dispute. Given the situation, William thought it would be better if she didn't attend the funeral to avoid a repetition of the unpleasant encounter that had just occurred. At my mother-in-law's funeral, I agreed to stay silent if it made William happy. We got busy with post-funeral tasks, and she called almost every day regarding the inheritance. Initially, William calmly explained, but over time, he began casually ignoring her calls. Tired of the constant interruptions, he finally agreed to meet her, and surprisingly, she became quite cheerful about the situation. Hearing this, I felt uneasy and wanted to accompany him, but he insisted on going alone. Over the past year, I've been assisting with the various procedures and arrangements following the deaths of William's parents. However, he thought it wouldn't be fair to involve me further in dealing with his sister and the inheritance distribution. He reassured me that he could handle it well, and asked me not to be concerned. Trusting his assurance, I chose to wait and observe how things would develop. Initially, I had planned to accompany him, but a sudden increase in workload at my company made it impossible for me to align with his schedule. As a result, William ended up meeting her alone as originally planned. That day was extremely hectic at work, with everyone diligently focusing on their tasks. During my break, I couldn't help but be anxious about William. I tried to switch back to work mode, believing that no news indicated that things were progressing smoothly. Out of the blue, my phone started ringing. The number was unfamiliar, but the hospital's name popped up on the screen. Nowadays, phones show the sender's name, even if the number isn't saved, especially if it's from an important place. William and I take pride in our good health, rarely needing to visit the hospital. The hospital calling was the one my mother-in-law used to go to years before she passed away. I couldn't figure out why they'd contact me now, but after a moment of hesitation, I answered the call. The nurse on the phone introduced herself and verified the hospital's name. When she heard William's name, she asked if I was his wife. After confirming, she urgently told me that William had been taken to the hospital, and they needed me to come as soon as possible. I briefed my boss about the situation, left work early, and found William still receiving treatment upon my arrival. A nurse quickly briefed me about my husband's critical condition, emphasizing the urgency of emergency surgery. Overwhelmed and in a daze, I was tasked with giving consent and signing multiple documents. Sensing my distress, the nurse sternly yet compassionately urged, "You must gather yourself. Your husband is fighting for his life." Her words snapped me back to reality. William was in a fierce battle, and the medical team was diligently working to save him. To regain my composure, I gently tapped my cheek and followed the nurse's guidance, completing the necessary paperwork. The doctors, putting in tremendous effort, expressed optimism that there was a high likelihood of William regaining consciousness, providing some comfort. However, I remained vigilant as I arranged the essentials for his hospital stay and reached out to various contacts. The intense moments persisted until late at night when I found solace as I sat beside him, sensing the warmth of his hand. Relief flooded over me, knowing he was alive, and tears welled up naturally. Since we were alone in the room, I allowed the tears to flow freely while tightly holding his hand. Desperately, I continued talking to him, hoping for a sign of consciousness to return. However, throughout the night, he remained unresponsive. A nurse suggested I take a break and rest, but I adamantly refused, determined to stay by his side, taking pride in my physical endurance. Around noon, unexpectedly, William's sister entered the room. This marked the first time I had seen her since my mother-in-law's funeral. We exchanged a brief nod, but internally I questioned her sudden appearance. I had informed a select few relatives and colleagues about William's situation, and she wasn't among them. Given the complications at my mother-in-law's funeral, I knew no other family members were in contact with her either. In essence, she seemed practically ostracized by the family and our father-in-law. Pondering alone seemed futile, so I asked her how she knew about this hospital. It's common to hear stories of people spotting someone familiar at a hospital, but I hadn't left William's room. It was implausible for her to have seen me elsewhere in the hospital. I questioned whether it even mattered what was happening with him. Was he brain dead? Did it appear that way? He'll definitely make it, right? Her assumption about his brain being dead, based on his unconscious state, seemed insensitive. A normal reaction would be to inquire about his safety or chances of recovery. She appeared to have already given up hope for my recovery. So he hasn't regained consciousness. I guess he doesn't have much time left. Since I made the effort to come here, the least you could do is cover my travel and meal expenses. Her attitude was infuriating. I hadn't invited her, yet she audaciously demanded compensation for her uninvited visit. Struggling to hide my irritation, I reminded myself that we were in a hospital, surrounded by other patients, close to the nurse's station. The last thing I wanted was to cause a scene in front of William. I took out more money than necessary from my wallet and handed it to her, anticipating potential dissatisfaction. I didn't want any further conversation with her at this moment. Seemingly satisfied with the amount, she left the room with a light step, mentioning she was going to eat. But just as she left, she stopped and called the child into the room. "You know who this is, right? My son, your nephew. I'm going to eat, so look after him for me," she commanded in an imposing tone, quickly walking away from the hospital room, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. She moved so fast that I didn't have a chance to talk to her. The boy left behind appeared uncertain initially, but then he approached me with a determined expression. Uncle wanted me to give you something," he mentioned, likely referring to William. Indicating a desire for privacy, he gestured for us to talk quietly. I bent down to his eye level. He pulled something out of his pocket and handed it over. "Uncle told me to give this to you without letting Mom find out. He said if I do it correctly, I might get to live with Dad. Did I do it right?" he inquired. I gently patted his head a few times to comfort him for a job well done. The thing he handed me turned out to be a letter from William. It wasn't a formal letter, just a sheet torn from a notebook. I quickly went through the letter. According to William, he and his sister had planned to meet at a cafe, but she changed the plan and asked him to come to her house instead. William suspected something was amiss and decided to record the events while waiting for the right moment. In the letter, he mentioned a mysterious injury he had around the time of his mother's death, which surprised me as I had no previous knowledge of it. Apparently, he had treated it himself without informing me. Reading the letter left me wondering why he chose to bring up these matters at this particular moment. As I delved deeper into the tumultuous saga surrounding William's mother's inheritance, an incredible tale unfolded. William had experienced an odd sensation in his leg while navigating through a crowd, leading him to discover a deep cut on his thigh. To his astonishment, he found a utility knife in his pocket, a tool he used for work. Although the blade wasn't exposed, he speculated that it might have accidentally caused the injury if it hit just the wrong spot. Deciding the wound was minor and likely to heal quickly, he opted not to share it with me during that hectic period, choosing to handle the injury on his own. However, the plot thickened when William's sister suggested that she was responsible for the injury. She asserted that she had intentionally inflicted it in a crowded place, aiming for an artery, but failing. Her detailed knowledge of the wound's exact location added a sinister layer to her claim. When I examined William's thigh while he was unconscious, I discovered the old cut. Despite my initial disbelief, I couldn't deny the clear evidence of his sister's malicious intent. The idea of someone causing harm for the sake of inheritance was repugnant to me, even though receiving an inheritance is preferable to not. Resorting to harm for personal gain is reprehensible. Contrary to my hopes, the old cut on William's thigh served as undeniable proof of his sister's ill intentions, stirring up anger within me. After redressing William, I refocused on the letter he had written. In it, he expressed a conviction that his life was in danger, evident from the rushed writing, suggesting he composed it while his sister briefly left the room. Oddly, she insisted on having her son, William's nephew, present during their inheritance discussion before she was disowned. Knowing William's affection for his nephew, she likely planned to use him as bait in a tearful plea to secure a larger share of the inheritance. Feeling threatened, William had instructed his nephew to deliver the letter to me in case anything happened to him. He also mentioned evidence in the inner pocket of his jacket. Following his instructions, I hadn't touched the jacket since the nurse handed it to me, along with his other belongings. As I reached into the inner pocket, I discovered a hard object, a voice recorder. Reflecting on the doctor's advice about people instinctively protecting their heads during a fall, I couldn't reconcile William's injuries on his arms, which suggested he was shielding his chest. The doctor's inquiry about heart conditions had been unexpected, given William's constant boasting about his robust health and absence of serious illnesses. The revelation came from the voice recorder in his chest pocket, unraveling the mystery. William had valiantly shielded it, risking his own life to protect crucial evidence. As I played the shocking contents, I found myself at a loss for words, realizing the gravity of the evidence that could potentially incriminate his sister. Acting promptly, I contacted the police. Shortly thereafter, William's sister returned in a cheerful manner, patting her stomach and expressing satisfaction. She demanded the chair I was using, nonchalantly crossing her legs and touching up her makeup. Inquiring about the outcome of the inheritance distribution, she claimed that William had agreed to give her a larger share. When questioned about whether she was with William during his fall, she asserted they had parted ways after leaving the cafe and professed ignorance about the accident. It was evident she was lying, as the voice recorder captured all the subsequent events, including the abrupt change of the discussion venue to the sister-in-law's house. Choosing not to confront her lies immediately, I instead posed inquiries about memories with William and their father. I questioned why she hadn't disclosed her divorce earlier, delving into her current living situation. Additional queries included the duration of her stay at the restaurant, the name of the place, and the circumstances surrounding her departure. However, her irritation grew, and she pushed me away, exclaiming, "Away, he was my father. You're just an outsider who married into the family." While I might not have a direct connection to the inheritance, William's life-threatening accident undoubtedly involved me, so I implored her to be truthful. "Do you think I'm lying?" she retorted, visibly outraged. In response, I played the voice recorder that William had risked his life to safeguard. The recording began with William expressing concerns about the challenging conversation and his intention to document it as evidence. His sister immediately pressed him for a larger share of their father's inheritance. Initially reserved, she claimed she needed assistance in raising her nephew alone. However, When William rejected her suggestion and insisted she seek child support from her ex-husband, her demeanor dramatically shifted. She confessed to inflicting the cut on William's thigh during the dispute over their mother's inheritance. "I thought if you were out of the picture, I'd get more," she admitted gleefully, although she acknowledged being scared at the time, limiting her actions to a mere cut. Now she boasted about her capability to make it look like an accident. "Be careful of your back in high places. I'm always watching for a chance," she menacingly threatened. The recording conveyed the palpable fear and tension in William's voice. Sensing the danger of staying at her house, William cleverly changed the topic, suggesting they move to a public place. "There's a great fish restaurant nearby. Let me treat you, sister. Why don't you get ready?" Suddenly, her demeanor shifted, and she left to prepare. In that moment, William quickly wrote a letter to me, entrusting it to his nephew. In a hushed voice, he mentioned the voice recorder, hoping I would find it. Just in case, he gave the letter to his nephew after leaving her house for a restaurant. William treated his sister to lunch, but she remained her usual self. Upon leaving the restaurant, William suggested consulting a lawyer due to the deadlock in their discussion. When William mentioned he was heading home, his sister insisted on accompanying him to the station. During their walk, she tried to dissuade him from involving a lawyer, claiming it would complicate matters. When William refused, she began shouting at him in the street. Remaining calm, William insisted that involving a third party was best, and said he would speak to a lawyer he knew. Suddenly, the situation took an unexpected turn. A sudden sound echoed, resembling a falling or rolling object, accompanied by commotion and urgent voices calling for an ambulance. The recording abruptly ceased, presumably triggered when William's jacket was removed during emergency treatment. Post-playback, the sister-in-law initially displayed shock, only to transition into defiance, dismissing the incident as a mere sibling argument unrelated to the inheritance dispute. The focus, she insisted, should be on establishing that William's fall was not accidental, but an intentional incident. Skeptical, she questioned the relevance of the situation and raised doubts about implicating her as the culprit. Despite her protestations, the presented evidence aimed to convince the police of the potential for foul play. Unbeknownst to her, the police, having arrived during her absence, had confirmed the contents of the voice recorder while waiting in concealment for her return. Upon her arrival, her gasp of disbelief shattered her misplaced confidence, realizing that her actions could no longer escape accountability. Plainclothes detectives posing as visitors covertly blocked the hospital room entrance on the 4th floor, eliminating any quick escape routes. As a detective approached her, panic-stricken and searching for an exit, the sister-in-law faced questioning, being the likely last person with William before the incident. In a desperate attempt to evade responsibility, she hastily claimed a case of mistaken identity, suggesting there could be 3 lookalikes for each person. Despite her recorded voice on the device, she resorted to a childish excuse. However, the police, unsaved by her feeble arguments, dismissed her with a nonchalant acknowledgement of the common behavior of culprits changing stories. As the police led her away, I handed the voice recorder to the lead investigator, concluding my involvement. With the sister-in-law's dramatic episode subsiding, another person emerged into the unfolding events. I dialed another number while reaching out to the police. As the nephew witnessed the man's entrance, he joyously exclaimed, "Daddy!" and leapt into his father's arms. The former brother-in-law acknowledged me with a nod and warmly embraced his son, conveying a pledge never to let go. Throughout the sister-in-law's interaction with the police, the nephew, visibly frightened, sought refuge behind me. Even after the departure of the law enforcement officers, his spirits soared upon the sight of his father. This marked the first encounter with the former brother-in-law since my mother-in-law's funeral, a connection initiated for a specific purpose. The safeguarded voice recorder, held by Liam, contained the sister-in-law's candid sentiments about her son. She candidly admitted that she never desired a child, only giving birth out of obligation, devoid of any affection. Childcare responsibilities primarily fell on the former brother-in-law, with occasional assistance from his parents. Following their divorce, he assumed custody, assuming it would be straightforward. However, the sister-in-law, seeking child support, successfully portrayed herself as a devoted mother and won custody. The prevailing notion that mothers often have an advantage in custody battles became a stark reality. Accepting the situation, the former brother-in-law believed that she might have developed maternal feelings, given her non-mistreatment of their son. Contrary to the conventional belief in maternal instincts, the sister-in-law proved to be an exception. In truth, she seized custody solely for financial gain, squandering the funds on herself. William's letter exposed his desire to rescue his nephew from this abusive environment, even if it meant forfeiting his entire inheritance. His insistence on involving a lawyer extended beyond inheritance matters, encompassing the welfare of his nephew. Observing my husband's unwavering determination, even in the face of the danger posed by his sister, I couldn't help but sense a resolute commitment to saving our nephew. It underscored the realization that I too needed to embrace and uphold that determination. While possessing the inheritance would have been advantageous, I never leaned on it. Being young, we could carve our own path. I wouldn't fault William for relinquishing his inheritance, especially if it was for the well-being of his nephew. William believed that by offering the entire inheritance, he could prompt the sister-in-law, driven by greed, to surrender custody of her nephew. The letter also outlined plans for the nephew's safe transition to his father once away from his mother. However, merely transferring the inheritance and rescuing the nephew wouldn't be the conclusion. The sister-in-law needed to be held accountable and compelled to regret her actions. As I shared the contents of William's letter, the former brother-in-law grew increasingly furious. Witnessing the drastic change in his son, he blamed himself for the post-divorce circumstances. Although the nephew lived with his mother, the former brother-in-law had secured a monthly visitation agreement. Despite consistent demands for child support, the sister-in-law obstructed all visitation attempts, making excuses and threatening the former brother-in-law with permanent separation from his son. Expressing regret for not confronting his sister earlier or checking on her secretly, the ex-husband repeatedly apologized to his nephew. He resolved to confront his sister, unaware that she had already been reported for suspicious circumstances surrounding William's fall and child mistreatment. Upon the arrival of the youth division, expressing a desire to hear from the nephew, I, as a guardian, was required to accompany him, alongside my ex-brother-in-law. Meanwhile, William's recovery remained uncertain, and given the urgency of the nephew's situation, prioritizing his well-being seemed paramount. At the police station, a confrontation unfolded between my ex-brother-in-law, accompanying his nephew, and William's sister, still regarded as a person of interest. In a moment of distress or perhaps foolishness, she began making outrageous accusations, claiming, "It was him. This man told me to do it. He's a demon. I'm the real victim here, seduced into marriage by a demon." She hysterically labeled her son as a child of a demon. Her ex-husband couldn't remain silent, challenging her. "What do you mean, a child of a demon? Stop harming the kid further." Despite his brother's logical arguments, she continued to threaten, refusing to acknowledge her actions. Accusing others and persisting with excuses only painted her as the real demon. At the police station, disdainful glances followed her as she was forcibly removed by the police due to the risk she posed to others. She was promptly detained, and the investigation gained momentum. Surveillance footage from a shop near the staircase where William was pushed revealed her making a pushing motion. Though the camera angle didn't definitively confirm the act, the detective expressed confidence in obtaining a confession. With the sister-in-law in custody, the focus shifted to the nephew's custody. Based on her recorded statements and the nephew's account, it was decided that he should stay with my ex-brother-in-law. The nephew, overjoyed to live with his dad, was assured a comfortable life with his grandparents. After the police interrogation, I returned to the hospital, resolved to stay by William's side until he regained consciousness. The following morning, William regained consciousness. Although there was no concrete proof yet, upon learning that his sister was being questioned by the police, he expressed the need to share crucial information. Following William's request, we summoned the detective. William disclosed that he was pushed from behind by his sister and asserted that her fingerprints, or rather her handprints, should be evident on the jacket he was wearing at the time. Forensics confirmed her handprints on the jacket, along with clear fingerprints. Concerned that she might still deny it, The police meticulously checked all nearby security cameras and appealed to the public for information. Eventually, someone filming nearby came forward, providing additional evidence. Their footage possibly captured the altercation, prompting the individual to review it upon realizing an incident had occurred. The footage distinctly revealed the sister-in-law pushing William. Confronted with undeniable evidence, she was defeated and arrested without resistance. In the aftermath, William, through his lawyer, sought compensation and medical expenses from her. However, her bank account was empty, and her possessions held little value. Even her beloved brand bags turned out to be fake, sourced from dubious origins. When asked for compensation, she claimed to have nothing to offer. In response, William proposed splitting his father's inheritance equally, eventually managing to collect the compensation and medical expenses when the inheritance was distributed. While most of the inheritance went towards William's payments, a small amount ended up with the sister-in-law. However, all the money was used for legal fees related to the crimes she committed, and her account now had little remaining funds. The sister-in-law's selfish and imprudent behavior led her to terminate contracts with lawyers who spoke inconvenient truths, causing her retainer fees to diminish with each dismissal. The lawyer she finally settled on, who merely followed her orders, struggled to provide a robust defense, making the trial appear bleak. Under the care of my ex-brother-in-law, the nephew's emaciated body gradually recovered to a more appropriate size for his age. These circumstances significantly influenced the custody battle.
In the gentle evening light, the intercom rang in the room. I wiped away the tears on my cheeks and glanced at the monitor. To my surprise, my mother-in-law and Sophia were standing side by side. They had come to help. Quickly, I went to the front door, opened it, and was surprised. "Come on, bring everything in," my mother-in-law instructed. People resembling movers entered the house, saying, "Excuse us," in cheerful tones. Perplexed, I exclaimed, "What's happening?" Liam, my son, hearing my confused voice, hurried down the stairs from his room. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, watching the movers busy at work. I replied, still not understanding. Turning back to Liam, I overheard my father-in-law James giving orders efficiently, and the movers brought items steadily into the living room and other spaces. All of a sudden, Liam's face went pale and he exclaimed, "No, you can't! Don't you know, Auntie?" His face had an eerie, white look. This house isn't Dad's anymore, and it's haunted. James turned around and the movers came to a standstill. With everyone's attention on him, Liam shivered. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Isla, 45 years old, and my husband Henry is 46. He's a calm businessman who doesn't drink, smoke, or gamble. Henry diligently works every day for our family. His favorite pastime? Well, it's watching movies with me on weekends. Up until last year, our son Liam used to join us. However, since he entered middle school, he's been more involved in extracurricular activities and spending time with friends, leaving us with fewer family moments." Though a sense of sadness lingered within me, Henry appeared to find it more heartening than anything else. He fondly recalls the decision not to attend the prestigious private college where his parents worked, opting instead for a local public college. He proudly talks about serving as the class president and student council president, highlighting his best friend from college. "Your best friend was James, right, Henry? You've always been such a good student," I tease. Henry laughs and replies, "My parents would have a fit if they heard that." Nostalgically, he adds, "Still, those were fun times." Curious, I inquire, "Are you having fun now?" as we watch a DVD at home. Henry simply responds, "I am." Then he glances around the living room and corrects himself. "Well, actually, it's more like happiness. We chose and bought this house ourselves. I have a wonderful wife, a lively son," he says with such sincerity that it makes me blush. "I couldn't ask for more." That's when you chime in with, "A gorgeous wife," I playfully inject, giving a swing of my arm. Henry chuckles, skillfully evading it. "Absolutely. Having a stunning wife brings me joy. Now the only thing left is to put in the effort to clear our mortgage. We're still in the process of paying off the mortgage on our home." Henry has organized things in a way that allows me to be a stay-at-home mom without worrying about finances. Feeling the warmth, I considered myself fortunate to have such a kind husband like Henry. As we sat side by side watching a DVD, I reflected on this. Henry has always expressed happiness with our married life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't as content before we got married. especially during his time at his parents' house. It's quite apparent given the strained relationship he has with his parents and his sister, Sophia. I heard that the discord began when Henry chose not to attend the college his parents had in mind for him. On the other hand, Sophia, who is 3 years older than Henry, obediently followed their parents' wishes. She attended the college they selected, maintained the high grades they expected, and even worked at a company they approved of. According to Henry, she couldn't think or decide for herself, and that's the situation she found herself in. It's convenient to follow your parents' instructions, but it also makes you reliant and incapable of making your own choices or adapting to different situations. As a result, she faced challenges in thinking for herself and making decisions independently, depending on the circumstances. In fact, when she began working, she discovered that she couldn't take any actions without clear instructions, and it made her feel uneasy. She left the company in less than a year. Soon after, her parents arranged a marriage for her, and she ended up marrying the man her parents chose, despite having Henry. They adopted my brother-in-law as their son, having him live with them. To me, it doesn't make sense to adopt a son when they already have a perfectly good eldest son, Henry. Speaking of their family, my father-in-law is just a regular businessman. I also didn't feel the need for them to stretch themselves financially to send their kids to private high schools. Oh, that's just silly pride on my parents' part. According to him, there's a wealthy family living near his parents' house. Their daughter was the same age as Sophia, and they used to play together as kids. However, from elementary school, she went to a private college and distanced herself from the other neighborhood kids. There wasn't any particular incident with that family, but Henry's parents seemed quite envious of them. They became determined to send their own children to private college as well, saving hard to afford Sophia's private college education. Due to the circumstances, our dinners at home were quite simple, but Sophia's lunches were always lavish, leading to a unique eating routine. Henry, without feeling the need to overexert himself, decided to go to a public college instead of a private one. I believe that was a smart choice. However, my in-laws were furious, and their feelings towards Henry changed significantly from that day on. They used to take pride in the admiring glances they received when talking about the prestigious college their daughter attended. When questioned about their son, they might have felt a bit embarrassed admitting he attended a public school. Still, they would have envisioned a life beyond unnecessary expectations, and it wouldn't have been any less wonderful. My in-laws and Sophia's family, along with their 3 kids, are currently staying in a rented house. I want to clarify that I don't think renting a house is a bad choice, but I can't help but think if there are other ways to use the money wisely, beyond just trying to impress others. They took on debt to send Sophia to a private college, and they're still working to pay it off. I've always found it challenging to understand my in-laws' views on money. This was also evident in the Christmas gifts. The presents for Sophia's children and Liam were noticeably different. It might be due to the difference in closeness since they all live together, but it felt unfair to Liam. A sigh escaped me as I thought about how Liam might be affected by all of this. My in-laws also didn't seem to appreciate the fact that we own our house, a 2-story one that's even bigger than their place with its 4 bedrooms. A study room? Quite bold for someone from a public school. Seems like such a fancy house is wasted on you folks, they occasionally say when they visit, making snide comments. Moreover, they nitpick little things, like a stain here or a discolored spot on the hardwood floor, and then casually remark, "It's not all that impressive after all." Honestly, I don't understand why they do that. If they don't like it, they don't have to come over. That's what Henry thinks. It's probably because they envy us for having money, but ironically, we own a house even though we have a mortgage. Henry chuckled, suggesting that their attempts to appear prosperous fall flat. My brother-in-law likely earns a decent income, and my father-in-law, despite being in his 40s, still works. However, their debts are holding them back, Henry reassured me. Yet when Henry and Liam aren't around, my mother-in-law and Sophia take the opportunity to visit. Lately, they've even started exploring the house while I'm making tea. "We should turn this into our bedroom," they say, making presumptuous suggestions. They believe the large room would make an excellent study for the kids. I finally asked them what they were doing, my annoyance evident. Immediately, they put on fake smiles and claimed they were just looking around. Slow with the tea, I closed the door to the room they were peeking into and asked them to return to the living room. My shock increased when my mother-in-law asked for a duplicate key. There was no way I could give her, someone who freely roams into others' houses, a key. There's a risk she might snoop through our drawers and closets when we're not home. After treating Henry poorly, it seemed incredibly selfish for them to request a key. I insisted on discussing it with Henry first. I didn't pay much attention to it and waited for Henry to come back before firmly saying no over the phone. "How can you refuse to give a key to your own parents?" My mother-in-law was angry. Unfortunately, we just couldn't trust them. "Please come over only when Isla or I am at home," Henry told her before hanging up. He emphasized that health is the most important thing, a saying that suddenly hit home when Henry was diagnosed with cancer. We were shocked when tests for stomach issues revealed the disease, and with each examination, more widespread cancer was discovered. The doctor said surgery was necessary, and without it, he only had a few months. We had insurance, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. Not just hospital bills, but also living expenses and the mortgage for the house. The happiness we had built seemed to crumble instantly. I was trembling with fear at the thought of losing Henry and anxious about our uncertain future. Clueless and scared, all I could think to do was to ask my parents for help. Since my parents had passed away and I was an only child with no other relatives to turn to, I decided to ask for help. "Okay, I'll go with you," Henry agreed. We went to Henry's parents and Sophia's family to explain the situation and ask for financial assistance. Despite the advancements in cancer treatment, Sophia seemed not to fully grasp the severity of the situation. The in-laws, though not as hesitant as Sophia, were still reluctant to provide financial help. "A few months ago, I heard that you had successfully cleared your debts." "Yes, we finally managed to do it. Please, we will definitely repay you. Just lend us the money for the surgery and hospital stay. The money you were planning to set aside for private school, lend it to us now, please. I'll work too. We're begging you," we practically pleaded, almost on our hands and knees. But no way. "We've just recently started to afford a little luxury. I have an insurance policy that forgives my mortgage in the event of my death. When that happens, we can sell the house and repay the borrowed money. I'll even write a promissory note," we begged repeatedly. Despite our pleas, my in-laws shook their heads. Despite anticipating it, we were left in despair. "Why don't you just sell the house now?" Of course, we knew that might be our only option in the end. But if we sell now, we must subtract the remaining mortgage from the sale price and still have enough to cover hospital and treatment costs, as well as rent for a new home. I heard that even after moving out, Henry used to send money home when he was single. It seemed only fair that they spend a little money on Henry's behalf. No matter how much we pleaded, my in-laws and Sophia's answers didn't change. Henry straightened his back and replied calmly, "Okay, that's enough." As we were leaving, my brother-in-law came after us, saying, "Wait a minute, it's not much, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't have any savings." He handed Henry $4,000. That's no surprise. He was helping with the debt repayments too, despite their claims of finally paying it off. It was also thanks to him. "I'll try to persuade them again. Please don't lose hope," my brother-in-law said. We deeply thanked him for saying that. "Thank you. I'm really grateful for your kindness, but do you have any other ideas?" "Yes, just like Sophia proposed, Ed and I are considering selling the house." I couldn't help but express my surprise at the suggestion. Saying it is one thing, but selling a house requires procedures and takes time. It won't be fast enough for Henry, who is set to be admitted to the hospital in a few days. Even if we manage to sell, we'll still need to find a new place to live. It's not a simple, easy process. "No worries. I thought of someone who could assist," Henry said, smiling and glancing at me. Over the past year since he got diagnosed with cancer, Henry fought bravely, even though he was told he only had a few months. He succeeded in making lots of joyful memories with us, his family, despite going in and out of the hospital multiple times. Even though we had grown distant, when the doctor mentioned he might not make it back home, I reached out to his parents' place. After that, they did visit a few times, but they'd swiftly leave, remarking, "He still seems okay," almost as if they were checking how much time he had left. It felt like they were coming solely to gauge how much longer Henry had. I shook my head quickly, attempting to dispel such a grim thought. I promptly pushed away that troubling idea, convincing myself it couldn't be true. When the doctor instructed me to contact the family, I understood the end was approaching. I called without delay. My mother-in-law gasped, "Oh no, that's awful. We need to hurry." "Yes, exactly. Please come to the hospital room right away," I replied. She said, "Oh, sure, I'll come if I can," and then hung up abruptly. Despite the unsettling response, I hurried back to the hospital room where Henry and Liam were patiently waiting. In the end, only my brother-in-law, who rushed from his job, and Henry's close friend James arrived. As we all gathered, Henry weakly opened his eyes, glanced around at everyone, and then closed them for the last time. The funeral arrangements and other details were handled by my brother-in-law and James while we went home to prepare. My brother-in-law stayed with Henry, and James drove us there. We left in the morning when the hospital called, and now the sun was already setting. Liam and I had left in such a hurry that morning that we hadn't even cleaned up after breakfast. In the dim evening light, I turned on the lights in the house and sat in a chair in the brightened living room. I started flipping through a photo album, and as I did, tears started to flow on their own. Wiping the tears that fell on the table, I selected a photo for the memorial service. The doorbell rang. I wiped the tears off my cheeks and looked at the monitor. My mother-in-law and Sophia were standing there together. They came to help. They didn't make it in time for the end, but they came, I thought, and I hurried to the front door to greet them. I opened the door, completely stunned. "Come on, bring everything in." I heard my mother-in-law's voice as people who looked like movers entered our house saying, "Excuse us," in an imposing manner. "What? Wait, what's going on?" I exclaimed in confusion, hearing my bewildered voice. Liam hurried down the stairs from his room upstairs. "What's happening, Mom?" he asked, following the mover's frantic movements with his eyes. I don't understand," I replied bewildered, looking back at Liam. "We're taking over my son's house. You guys need to leave exactly. Get out right now." My father-in-law briskly directed the movers, and the belongings started to fill the living room and other rooms quickly. Liam, changing his demeanor abruptly, shouted, "No way! Don't you know, Auntie?" he asked, his face pale. "This house isn't Dad's anymore, and it's haunted." On hearing this, I was left in shock. My father-in-law turned around and the movers abruptly stopped. All eyes shifted to Liam, who visibly shivered. In the midst of this, someone entered the house without permission. James's loud voice echoed, demanding the intruders leave immediately. Startled, the movers, without confirming with their clients, hastily removed the belongings they had brought in. Confused about what to do, they left the items on the street in front of the house. Panicking, I turned around at the sound of my nephew's voice and saw my brother-in-law with his 3 children. The kids complained about their belongings being left on the street. My brother-in-law, usually mild-mannered, was visibly angry. Amidst their argument, he coldly announced, "I can't deal with you anymore. I want a divorce." Shocked, I asked, "Wait, what are you talking about?" My brother-in-law then negotiated directly with the movers to take only his and the children's belongings to his parents' house. Amidst this difficult time, I apologized for the trouble caused. "I'll request the movers to transport my kids and our belongings to my parents' house," he mentioned, not even making eye contact with Sophia. Following that, he and the children departed with the movers. On the street, Sophia couldn't hold back her tears, and my in-laws found themselves perplexed amidst the scattered possessions. Curious neighbors emerged to witness the unfolding events, transforming the scene into a distressing spectacle. "Can we at least bring these things indoors? They're blocking the way here," James proposed. I agreed with a nod. "Certainly, feel free. After all, this is your home." Perplexed, my in-laws questioned, "What do you mean?" Here's what really happened. 3 years ago, the day after Henry's parents disapproved of our relationship, Henry introduced us to an imposing man. This man was James, a real estate business owner, who even handed me his business card. Although I had heard he was Henry's college friend, his demeanor and presence made me mistakenly believe he came from another world. Even Liam in middle school was so frightened that he held on to me tightly. Concerned, I sneakily looked at Henry. Catching my gaze, Henry tilted his head and then burst into laughter after a moment. "Don't worry, it's all right. James might seem scary, but he's a successful businessman now," Henry reassured. Liam cautiously spoke up. Out of nowhere, James's eyes widened, and he playfully smacked Henry on the head. Despite Henry being unwell, he laughed heartily. Liam looked so pale that I worried if he was even breathing. Surprisingly, James didn't attend our wedding, even with an invitation. He also never comes over when we ask him to. Oh, that reminds me, James was often mentioned in Henry's tales of college days and nights out. Based on those stories, I had imagined him as a reliable and good friend. I never thought they were the same person until they both stared at me. I avoid weddings and home visits because my intimidating looks could create problems. "Oh, that explains why you're still single, right?" I chuckled as I watched their playful teasing. It was evident he was the James I had heard about. Both of them paused and turned to look at me. "Sorry, it's just that Henry can be overly excited like a child. He's always like this. James, keep in mind, a father's dignity is crucial." "Dignity, huh? Dad never had that in the first place," Liam remarked, bringing some lightness to the conversation. I informed James about how Henry felt disappointed for not being able to attend our wedding and expressed our desire for him to visit us whenever he can. "Thank you. Now, let's get down to business since time is limited," James said, suddenly getting serious. "First, let's assess the condition of the house." James carefully examined every room, including the outer walls and meter box. Following a thorough inspection, he retrieved his laptop and began typing. After a moment, he turned the screen to share his findings. "What do you think of this house price?" The suggested amount left me astonished. It exceeded our initial purchase cost. "Well, that's quite a generous estimate, but can you realistically sell it at this price? It's been about 8 years since we moved in, and it would be counterproductive if it doesn't sell. We haven't done any renovations in many years, and, as my mother-in-law and sister-in-law pointed out, there are stains here and there, and the hardwood floor is quite old." "Ah, I remember Henry mentioning that. They were discussing how they plan to utilize each room, weren't they?" James reassured us. "Absolutely, they believe the house is good enough to live in as it is. Don't worry, it will sell at this price." Henry also gave me his assurance. "You can trust James, okay? Let's proceed with this price," I said with a smile. James promptly placed several documents on the table. "Oh, and we need to find a new place to live." Responding with a smile, James said, "Yes, of course." Among the documents were rental agreement forms. "First, I'll directly buy this house. That takes care of your first concern. Then I'll lease the same house back to you. There, your second concern is also sorted." I was amazed as James continued. "I'll send the money from selling the house to your account in a few days. We can use it to pay off the remaining mortgage." James smiled confidently, a grin that replaced his previously intimidating look with a boyish joy. While filling out the documents, I noticed the rental amount for the house was $400. Both Henry and Liam seemed surprised, leaning over to look at the document. "You mean $4,000, right?" I laughed, thinking it was a mistake. James said, "No, it's not a mistake. That's what I owe to Henry." After a moment of thought, Henry replied simply, "No, you don't." But James began to tell me about their time as students. It turns out James was a real troublemaker in his youth, getting into police trouble and frequent fights that left his mother in tears. During college, James's single mother was hospitalized due to exhaustion and stress. Seeing his frail and diminished mother, he realized his behavior was causing her stress and broke down crying. From that point on, he changed his ways, stopped fighting, and stayed out of trouble with the police. However, despite his transformation, a cigarette butt was found on the school's rooftop, causing a small fire. The college made it a big issue, and due to his bad reputation, James was immediately blamed, risking expulsion. Fearing he would upset his mother again, Henry was the only one who believed in James's innocence. James fondly reminisced, "He was the only one who believed in my innocence. He was the student council president at the time, and we hadn't even spoken before that." I marched down to the principal's office to protest and gathered evidence by talking to fellow students. After much effort, I identified the person accused of smoking the cigarette. Despite the skepticism around, I believed his denial. Thanks to your support, I graduated from college, became a responsible son, and eventually established my own business. This is why I felt indebted to Henry. As a family, we gratefully accepted the rent proposal, marking the culmination of events from 3 years ago. Now, as Liam mentioned, I own the house and am renting it to your family. James assured us of the legitimacy, offering to show documents later. During the funeral, everything proceeded smoothly, and we relocated to a 2-bedroom apartment recommended by James. While unpacking, James hinted at an eventual return to the house. When I inquired, he shared a plan, whispering conspiratorially. Days later, we pretended to have forgotten items and, accompanied by James, returned to the house. My mother-in-law reluctantly served tea and snacks as Liam asked, "How's living here?" His father-in-law responded with delight, and as Liam probed further, we discovered an unexpected twist in the story. Liam nervously glanced around the living room, visibly scared. Recalling the strange occurrences, he told everyone, You know, since Dad got sick, I've heard weird noises. Once, I even thought Mom had returned, but it was just the hem of a skirt at the top of the stairs. When I checked, no one was there. Interrupting his mother-in-law, Liam and James simultaneously looked upstairs, concerned. Is someone upstairs? That's impossible. Sophia, who had been downhearted since her divorce, remained silent. Trying to lighten the mood, Liam said, "Cut it out with the weird talk. I didn't hear anything." Liam and James exchanged glances, quickly gathered their things, and said, "That's a relief. We'll be taking our leave now." They hurriedly left the house and got into the car. The in-laws, who had come to see them off, had frightened looks on their faces. In the car, everyone burst into laughter, relieved by the escape from the spooky atmosphere. James had a spontaneous plan, triggered by Liam mentioning seeing a ghost. According to James, it was a punishment for being distant to Henry. He questioned how parents and a sister could leave their dying son and start preparing to move into his house. As James drove, his words felt true, and he and Liam repeated similar things, leading to unexplained paranormal occurrences in the house. The in-laws and Sophia, frightened by house noises, mistook them for poltergeists and complained to James and Liam. However, James and Liam never experienced any of it. Liam remarked on the scary power of suggestion. Eventually, unable to bear it, the in-laws and Sophia moved out of the house. James, seemingly business-minded, helped them find a budget-friendly apartment. Reflecting on Sophia's tough situation after divorcing and having to work again, Liam and James applauded her efforts. They hoped the family would make it in the end. Returning to the house they bought with Henry, they lived there for $400 a month. The brother-in-law and his 3 kids reappeared, but Sophia's attempts to reconcile were unsuccessful. Once a month, James collected rent on the pretext of Henry's monthly death anniversary. After paying respects, they had dinner together, and James listened to Liam's college troubles. Liam and James shared a secret joy, James's stories about Henry's student days during dinner. These stories revealed new sides of Henry, making everyone laugh at the dinner table. Despite making excuses like a child, Henry's spirit seemed present, and they cherished these moments.